Hello everyone and welcome to Dark Aspects, a web series where I take a look at the family-friendly games of Nintendo's history from the perspective of an adult, to uncover any heavier storytelling or morbid jokes the developers may have snuck in. I can't tell you how excited I've been to cover the remake of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, because the GameCube original was filled to the brim with so many non-Mario things that it'd make your priest, your rabbi, and your minister collectively gasp in shock. Rogueport is not your father's Mario Hub world. It's a filthy thieves' den with a noose literally hanging out in the town square. I was worried Intelligent Systems would remove the gallows or something for the Switch version, but they made it interactive instead. And Nintendo even allowed an NSO subscriber to use it as the background of their profile picture. Before we begin, I wanted to talk a little bit about the prep work I did for this project. It took me a little over 50 hours to complete the TTYD remake 100%. That may seem a little long, but I was incredibly thorough with the playthrough. This may just be Mario's most text-dense RPG ever. In addition to there being tons of townsfolk and side characters that get new lines of dialogue in between chapters, Goombella, your first partner, has something to say about each and every one of them via her tattle ability. And that's not even static either. Her descriptions sometimes change depending on what's happening in the story. Goombella has fresh commentary for every single screen, with flavor text for even a small room you'd otherwise spend 2 seconds in. She'll speak when certain events unfold during cutscenes, of course, but if you have any of the other partners out instead, they'll react differently depending on their personality. For example, Professor Frankly will reference the phrase, "When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me," before cutting himself off and stating that, well, you know the saying. Goombella will admit that she doesn't actually know what he's talking about. But Madame Flurry, an older, refined lady with a design that just screams Eve for everyone, will comment about it being inappropriate. Then there's extra side stories told by gossipers, minstrels, dreamers, and brothers that add to the lore of an already lore-rich game. I don't recommend playing the way I did to try and absorb all of this text in the span of a couple of weeks or so, but despite a bit of fatigue, I am in awe at the sheer amount of world building that never feels like a waste of time to learn about. Anything I talk about today is based on information pulled directly from the game's script. And since there is so much to talk about, with TTYD being much darker than your typical Mario adventure, I will be splitting this video project up into several parts. What you're about to watch now covers the history of Rogueport, as well as the prologue to the end of Chapter 2, but I will be jumping around to later parts of the game when relevant, so be warned, there will be overall plot spoilers right away. If you've never experienced the original and don't know what happens, I recommend stopping here and coming back once you've played it or the Switch version. With that out of the way though, let's begin this deep dive into one of my top 5 favorite video games of all time to discuss why this is a candidate for darkest Mario game ever. Our tale begins with an actual storybook that would make for a fairly harrowing bedtime story. An awfully long time, aka 1 millennium ago, there was a prosperous town where people lived happily, and I guess the waters were always infested with nibbles. But tragically, a great cataclysm struck and brought the lively town to utter ruin in a single day, sinking it down into the depths of the earth. According to the old legends of Rogueport as told by Grifty, this sudden destruction was not due to natural disasters, but caused by a demon from the dark beyond, the Shadow Queen. A quarter of the old city became the demon's den, the Palace of Shadow, and from this cursed place the queen sent out her minions, the evil Shadow Beldam being one of them, to conquer the land. In an effort to further increase her power, this tyrant created the crystal stars to hold the essence of the heavens. These stars were then scattered across the map to exert her influence, and Hooktail Castle was one of the castles constructed to contain them. Hooktail the dragon and her 2 siblings stated to be the queen's pets, who spread fear and sorrow everywhere they go. Even the Pit of 100 Trials has a backstory. It was built by Her Majesty as a dungeon she could throw anyone she disliked into, so that they may rot or succumb to the monsters she's filled it with. 1,000 years ago, it was not a mustached plumber who saved the world, but a toad hero, and his 3 companions, a wise Goomba, a stalwart, scar-riddled Koopa, and a magic-using Boo destined to challenge the oppressive, all-powerful queen. Sadly, they were no match for her might, so the Goomba of their group had the idea of stealing the queen's crystal stars and using them against her, which successfully damaged the demon. However, it wasn't going to be enough to end her reign, so the team decided to use the power of the stars to seal her away instead. They all managed to banish the queen to the deepest reaches of the palace. But before she was sealed for good, she cursed the 4 of them so that the moment they stopped touching the crystal stars, a black box would appear to seal their souls within. The heroes opted to spread out across the world to scatter the 7 stars once more, in the hope that the seal would remain. The last 4 stars carried the curse though, which ultimately claimed each hero. The Goomba and Boo heroines were able to reach their destinations, resting their stars in the Great Tree and Creepy Steeple respectively, but the Koopa hero had his stolen by the Pirate King Cortez, while the Toad hero collapsed from exhaustion and had to entrust it to a traveling healer to hide for him. Nevertheless, when they let go of the stars, their spirits were all sealed inside of black chests, the very same ones that quote-unquote curse Mario with helpful abilities. As far as why they present themselves as malevolent beings who deceive Mario, my theory is that a condition of their own curse is to hex whoever frees their souls. So they all bestow Mario with new powers cleverly disguised as malicious tricks to elude the Shadow Queen and help whip her but good. With the Demon Queen only sealed, no one dared go near the palace door out of fear for her return. However, as the years passed, the story faded into legend, and many generations later the abandoned area began to attract the penniless and the immoral. Rogueport, the main setting of this game, was built on the remains of the fallen city, and rumors began circulating about a treasure hidden in the underground ruins. But some know the truth, that in her house at the palace, dead Shadow Queen waits dreaming. Knowing that her seal might not last forever, the 4 heroes of old created a magical map to the stars for a future hero, placing it in a special box that could only be opened by the pure of heart. Beldum eventually found said box, and in the modern day tricked Peach into opening it. But because the town square had too many prying eyes, she failed to both kidnap the princess and take the map back, so now it's in Mario's possession. I find it hilarious that Beldum was basically scared of old Toadsworth, so the X-Nauts, led by Sir Grotus, who desires to collect the crystal stars and break the seal to awaken the demon, then offer up Peach as a vessel, had to steal her away when Toadsworth wasn't looking. Wonky, the information peddler, admits that he was likely the only person who witnessed them taking her, and appropriately feels bad about not saying anything until his conversation with Mario. In the English GameCube version script, he instead says, "People get kidnapped, whatever," which is disturbingly nonchalant. I can see why the localizers removed that line for Switch. I'm surprised and delighted about all the changes they didn't make though. The Rogueport of today is still the seediest locale Mario's ever visited. You got a Goomba who's constantly getting scammed, and talks about being defrauded with a fake credit card. There's a Dugan, a species unique to Paper Mario, who seeks out shady jobs for easy money and has probably never done an honest day's work in his life. Within the first 10 minutes of taking control of everyone's favorite plumber, Mario's mugged by a bandit who steals half of his coins and hides out in a disgusting, roach-infested house filled with trash and questionable wall stains. In the Japanese GameCube version only, a chalk outline of a toad can very surprisingly be found drawn on his floor, complete with what looks like a dried pool of blood near his head. There are plenty more thieves hiding out from the law in this area, and even a Goomba fixer, who can make any problem just go away. The Help Wanted Trouble Center quest takes this further, revealing that he not only discreetly disposes of things, but people too. The very first NPC you can interact with is a Bob-omb, who talks about how, in these times of violence, you never know when you're going to kick the old bucket. Then in that same harbor, this toad unloads onto Mario the fact that he's given up on all of his life's dreams, and now just stares out into the sea, depressed. Life stinks, you know that? Most everyone who isn't a crook warns you about them, or vents about their own grievances with Rogueport. Even the people who occupy the nicer, for Rogueport, west side of town aren't happy. Take this troubled Toad family, consisting of a married couple and their 2 children, for instance. The mother is obsessed with the local parlor and can be seen playing there all hours of every day instead of spending time with any of her loved ones. She shamelessly sings about how, if and when the family wants to eat, they all just go buy their own food. It's so sad because one of her boys talks about how it would be nice if they could all eat dinner together for once, but they never do. They don't spend any time with each other at all. The father is an author who's been struggling with writer's block and thinks the solution is to travel the world on his own for inspiration, but opts to stay home fantasizing about it instead while continuing to write bad novels that never sell. The two brothers don't get along because one of them never leaves the house, since, Rogueport is scary and filled with weirdos, while the other wanders outside, not looking back because it's boring at home, and his parents don't appear to care where he's at anyway. The father does worry about his son who stays inside all the time becoming warped, but he doesn't do anything about it. That is, until he stops selfishly daydreaming about traveling alone, and decides to take everyone on a vacation. And while we don't see Mario scolding the mom, her dialogue implies that he did speak up about their situation, as she says, "What? You say my kids have it rough?" After belting out a song about how they can handle being independent, the mom finally admits that she should pay a little more attention to them. Maybe. It isn't until the end of the game, but thankfully this side story does have a happy ending. After a much-needed family getaway, Mama Toad realizes the value of being present in their lives, and even cooks them lots of spaghetti. It also did have a rejuvenating effect on the Papa, as he becomes motivated enough to write a book about Mario's quest he dubs Paper Mario. It's cool because the play Madame Flurry stars in post-game is an interpretation of this Toad's novel. The depressed, albeit rich Koopa who lives next door cooped up in bed all throughout the game was moved after reading this disturbing story of Mario's adventure too, and agrees to finance the upcoming movie adaptation as an executive producer, finally providing him happiness with an opportunity to be productive. It's nice everything wound up working well for these folks, but it sure did take a long time. These poor Toad kids deserve to be happy. While we're here on the west side, this area of Rogueport is controlled by the Piantas, a species returning from Super Mario Sunshine, though unlike the paradise that is Isle Delfino, the few Piantas who live in this shabby town belong to a crime ring known as the Pianta Syndicate. The Pianta Parlor I was just referring to, where the Toad mother wastes her days away, that's a front for the Syndicate head's business. These gangsters are comparable to real-world Yakuza, but more so the Sicilian Mafia, also known as the Italian Mob or simply the Mafia, as evidenced by the Italian names of its members, who all refer to their boss as the Don. This leader also goes by the title Dawn of Untimely Death, while the names for him in other languages are based around the combination of the infamous Al Capone with the Godfather films
Don Corleone, give me justice.
Their outfits are also clearly mobster, with a black suit, fedora, sunglasses combo, with the hilarious twist that they're all also rocking a grass skirt, signature to Piantas. Silliness and appearance aside, this gang is said to be violent, as shown early on during Goombella's introduction, where a couple of members can be seen jumping a craw of the rival East Side Rogueport gang, the Robos. The implications of their ongoing turf war is quite shocking, considering the fact that there are staked skulls leading to both territories in town, and on the bridge in the East Side. This brutality is often depicted in media as warnings for trespassers, or as trophies of war, stemming in inspiration from real-world examples throughout human history. Speaking of historical relevance, the European GameCube version removed one of two reaction animations for Mario where he raises a single arm up into the air. This was obviously not the intention, but it likely resembled the Nazi salute enough to be taken out by their localization team, and the fact that it was replaced entirely for all regions in the Switch version is at least worth mentioning. Let's step outside of this seedy sailor town for a breath of fresh air in Petal Meadows though. That is, before storming a gnarly sewer to unlock the path to Hooktail Castle. That's right, the first chapter boss is one of the Shadow Queen's pet dragons, who's been wreaking havoc on the hapless Koopa citizens of Petalburg for quite some time now. Hooktail loves devouring innocents, and one Toad wonders what her all-time record is. We at least know she recently lunched on Old Man Skoo 2 villages over, and Mayor Kroop claims that the flyby snackings have them all on pins and needles. This dialogue, paired with the hundreds of Koopa skeletons in her castle, make me certain that her death count is astonishingly high. Koops, a future party member, has been especially traumatized by Hooktail's reign of terror because 1 decade ago, his dad marched off to the monster's dwelling to confront her. He never made it back, however, so he's been a missing Koopa ever since. Koops ultimately wants to avenge him, but he also wishes to finish what his old man started for the sake of his fellow villagers. Koop's girlfriend, Koopy Koo, desperately wants him to stay behind out of fear of him being eaten too, but the once timid turtle pushes forward and leaves without her blessing. Well, you can head straight to the castle from here, but backtracking to speak with her reveals that she will, in fact, support his decision, so that's nice. Something particularly morbid happens soon upon entering the dragon's domain. A pile of Koopa bones reminds Koops of his father, and to be fair, the only distinguishing feature between these dull bones here and those dull bones over there are the blue shoes, his dad's signature color. He thinks the corpse is that of his father, but quickly discovers he's made a mistake. A letter the late Koopa's bony hand clutches has last words addressed to his son, Colorado, the explorer from the Nintendo 64 Paper Mario. We see firsthand the grim fate of the father of a character our heroes come to know quite well. So if they ever cross paths again, Mario's going to have to break the news that his daddy's become a dragon's chew toy. Koops is embarrassed he misidentified his old man, and very sadly wonders if the other pile of bones across the room is actually him. You know, maybe he's the ominously red one Goombella says is super creepy that proceeds to reanimate itself and threaten Mario. Hundreds of dull bones then drop from the ceiling, which is, again, really disturbing because all of them are undead Koopas who probably perished here. If you, the player, put the controller down, Mario and his partner will just ride the gray wave until they're thrown out of the room, which makes his threat that Mario will be nothing but bones from this moment on pretty empty. Later on in the Palace of Shadow, there's a similar sequence involving the much tougher Dark Bones, who's there to halt those who would awaken the Shadow Queen. Instead of Red Bones not wanting his skeleton crew disturbed, the Dark Bones here decrees that anyone who disturbs her will fall into the depths of endless darkness. And this dude's true to his word. Not fighting back against this ocean of fallen Koopas pulls Mario to the center of the room, where a black hole, we can actually see in the Switch remake, opens up in the floor to swallow him whole. This results in a series staple, the non-standard game over, which first appears back at Hooktail Castle actually. Specifically this room, that looks like it was used to contain and torture prisoners. There's an obvious trap of a treasure box in the middle, but we need what's inside, so a lovely jaunt through a spiky labyrinth is required to proceed. All while a spiked ceiling slowly lowers itself to impale our heroes if they don't escape in time. It's easy to find the exit with tens of seconds to spare, but if you dilly-dally, the clock ticks down to doom, and Mario's party gets a free piercing. Another timer-based game over can be triggered in the Great Tree of Boggly Woods, home to the insect-like Jabbies and Punies. The former beings have formed a temporary alliance with the X-Nauts, except for Jabble, he goes his own way, so that they may seize control of the tree. Lord Crump, Grotus's lackey, has been busy searching it for the Emerald Crystal Star left behind in care of the Punies by the aforementioned Goomba hero 1,000 years ago. Crump's made some modifications to streamline the process, like installing machine-operated doors in prison cells to contain those who dare stand in his way. As such, this chapter has a subtle nature versus technology theme going for it that sort of reminds me of Kremkroc Industries Inc. from Donkey Kong Country, a factory built by invaders on the side of DK Island. It's also very reminiscent of the logo used for Shigesato Itoi's Mother 3, its letters consisting of an unnatural mixture of wood and metal designed to be mentally unsettling. The way this mechanical laboratory door was bolted into a living tree is upsetting to look at, because in Itoi's words, you are forcibly coordinating incompatible things and matching them. This is just a normalized aesthetic that makes up our modern world, but it's one of those things where it is discomforting when you really stop to think about it. Timers are also discomforting though. So getting back to that pressing matter, after Crump swipes the Crystal Star from Mario, he tries to exact revenge on him, and all of the Punies who escaped his trap via a remote time bomb he planted inside the tree. You've got precisely 5 minutes to escape a fate of being buried in rubble. And to make things more scarily immersive, the timer persists through dialogue boxes and fights. Once it reaches 0, the screen simply, but effectively fades to white if you're engaged in battle, while violently shaking first with dust falling from the ceiling if you're on the field. The color of the Punies' antennae all turning an alarming red. It's followed by an explosion sound, and the typical game over screen is revealed. To save the tree, and yourself, Crump must be caught up with at the main exit. Thankfully, there's a significant obstacle blocking his escape, that obstacle being the not-so-puny Puny Elder, so Mario and crew are eventually able to back up her bad back, which forces the big goon to deactivate his bomb, giving us plenty of time to trash his robot suit and send his underlings packing. My favorite special game over comes quite a bit later in Chapter 6 aboard the XS Express train. The only cabin that appears to be completely unoccupied is 4, but it's actually haunted. Which checks out, as 4 is an infamously unlucky number in Japan because of its association with death. Using Vivian's veil reveals that it is indeed rooming an invisible passenger, Ghost T, the spirit of a deceased Toad cursed to haunt this room he passed away in many years ago. He's also a prankster, who morbidly jokes that he'll take Mario's life, before seriously explaining that his old diary keeps him tethered to this world, because of his fear that someone will read it. However, he can't leave his cabin, so Mario must help the ghost by returning his confidential journal, without peeking at the no doubt juicy contents within. Strangely, Paper Mario protagonists have a history of reading diaries not intended for their eyes, though curiosity will kill the player if they instigate it. I personally did not hesitate for a single second, as immediately after obtaining the private book, I pried it open and ignored the game's many warnings about its owner cursing me. The game does not reward your bad behavior, as before any saucy secrets are spilled, the screen darkens with an analog horror filter to the tune of a sinister-sounding ambient track. Mario repeatedly nods his head, and Vivian smiles in anticipation, until a scare chord plays and a giant Ghost T suddenly appears to jump scare the two of them. Then a warped circle transition takes us to a game over. This is much scarier than the original version in my opinion, where a regular-sized Ghost T quickly phases in front of Mario, and the screen starts flipping around but with no color changes. One of the absolute best game overs in the series though, next to Super Paper Mario's even more amazing ones, involves our hero uncharacteristically joining the Shadow Queen. His sprite will turn to that of when he's taking control of Mario's body and it's all hunched over with widened black eyes. This quirk was actually restored from the original Japanese version of the game. The English GameCube release among other regions didn't change Mario's pose, so he just continued to stare at her angrily, with his partner not reacting at all. The white text on the black background reading, "For Mario, for Peach, and for the world it was," then fading into the usual game over screen is brilliant and chilling. To go all the way back to the first game over though, we know Hooktail Castle is filled with all sorts of nasty tricks to impede Mario's progress. However, none are nastier than the owner, Hooktail herself. And not just because she can dupe the player with a free foot-smelling session. The localizers doubled down on, with new dialogue revealing that to be the reason Coop's father wound up in her belly. They didn't bring back the line about people paying good money to do this though. No, the devious dragon does more than take a bite out of Mario after accepting her scandalous offer. Whether you fall for her ruse or not, honestly, as a kid, I did say yes to the extra special badge she supposedly had. A low on health Hooktail briefly exits stage left and reappears suddenly to mow down on some toads in the audience. X's form over the eyes of those who were attacked, but it doesn't mean they're dead, as those who have fallen over but avoided the beast's maw get back up and scurry away. You'd think the unlucky toads she's munching on wouldn't survive, especially since the act heals her for 10 HP, but jumping on her head will release the victims from her mouth. What's interesting to note is that the toads will only be freed from attacks to her head, so a player who relied solely on Mario's hammer and Koops' shell toss to finish the fight for example, wouldn't know that they aren't beyond saving. Koops' dad is spit back up no matter what in the end of chapter cutscene, but not the toads. So those who weren't released will have to find a way to crawl out of Hooktail's corpse off screen. Yes, it's implied that Hooktail does die, as her brother Gloomtail later mentions being concerned that his sister hasn't written to him as of late. Don't worry about how he's able to receive mail behind an ancient sealed door. Also, Koopley was in there for 10 years? That is pretty gross to think about, because he would have had to subsist and eat whatever she was digesting. Anyway, the poor audience members attending these boss fights just aren't safe. The idea of a boss sacrificing them to heal shows up again even more brutally for the duel against the Pirate King Cortez and the Shadow Queen. The former is able to absorb their souls in his spirit form, and the latter orders her many dead hands to seize and drag the entire crowd into the Shadow Realm to fully replenish her life force. At least in my Cortez fight, the crowd was asleep when he consumed their essence. On a less macabre but still disturbing note, Lord Crump abuses the spectators in his last battle by sucking them up in his Magnus von Grapple 2.0 mech to use as machine gun ammunition. Yes, the game literally says he's armed with machine guns, which surprised me. That's what they are, but I think the writers would want to avoid using the word gun as much as possible. This isn't Sonic Adventure 2, or Shadow the Hedgehog. Chapter 3 of Glitz and Glory may not be everyone's choice of favorite chapter, but it's certainly mine, and honestly, I think it's my favorite in the entire franchise. After a Pikmin-like adventure in the not Great Deku Tree, Mario's magical map highlights the floating island in the sky of Glitzville, called Oolong Town in Japanese, as the next destination. It's a Chinese-inspired tourist town with the Glitz Pit as its main attraction, a UFC-style fighting arena, although weapons like Mario's hammer are allowed, drawing in all kinds of clamoring combatants, clawing their way to the top to try and become the next champion. On the surface, Glitzville attracts families who travel there to casually enjoy the matches, but behind the scenes, the richest people in the world wager on the bouts. The fighters are all very distinct, from Crawdaddy, the Dark Gatekeeper, who's basically the Undertaker, claiming he'll drag you through the gate to the Netherworld, to Rock Hawk, the current champion. It's worth mentioning that he's called Hawk Hogan in the GameCube Spanish Nintendo of Europe translation. As for the English version, Rock Hawk. Rock Hawk. It sounds like there's a joke there, but I just can't think of anything. Knock knock, who's there? Rock Hawk sucks. Rock Hawk sucks who? Rock Hawk sucks Rock. Anyway, he's a big gold bird rocking a big gold belt, with one of the 7 crystal stars Mario must collect as its buckle. Or so it seems. I wanted to steal the belt from him to check, but Goombella tells me that's wrong, so we must do it the fair, albeit hard way, by joining the league, becoming a fighter, and working our way up the ranks to eventually challenge him for the grand prize. Simply getting to Glitzville is quite the affair though, as we can't just sprout wings and fly up there, as Flurry lovingly makes clear. And if a floating cloud lady / wind spirit can't do it, then I guess we're out of luck. Nah, there's a direct flight from Rogueport in a special Cheep Cheep blimp, but according to Frankly, the only way to secure a seat is through certain channels. Apparently, all tickets go through Don Pianta, the leader of the Pianta Syndicate I talked about in the last video, who makes regular jaunts over to Glitzville, but frankly warns that the rumors about him are scary. He makes crying babies weep after all. Thankfully, the Don sympathizes with Mario's plight to rescue a girl he's gone gaga for, and agrees to hand over a blimp ticket in exchange for, a favor that he must do right away. So don't worry, Mario won't be called upon for a later service indeterminately.
Someday, and that day may never come, I'll call upon you to do a service for me.
There's just a warning that Mario's luck may turn terrible if he fails to find the Don's daughter, who's skipping town to elope with one of his own associates. After finding and meeting with the runaway couple, you can humorously go back to the big man's office and decline to tell him their whereabouts, which will result in him getting furious, threatening that they're going to need a mop to pick up what's left of Mario for refusing him. Nevertheless, the lovers come rushing in to open up their hearts, which feels like a poison mushroom in the gut of the Don, as Francesca reportedly used up her last favor long ago, and Frankie's scolded for this being the way he repays his debt. The lovebirds are ultimately given his blessing, but it gradually causes the Don to become sick with worry, so Mario will have to help the family again soon enough. Yes, Mario actually becomes a friend of the Mafia in this game. With that apparent soap opera dealt with, we must now sign a contract to start a new life as a rookie in the minor league. Grubba, the Glitz Pit promoter, explains how as a poor pup, he didn't give a Poke's patoot for the big city, but he soon found himself motivated by the world of martial arts and fought his way to fame and fortune. He's since retired from participating in matches, but he earned enough from his glory days to be set for life, and encourages Mario to similarly shoot for the stars while he's still in his prime. Because, Mario is 24 to 25 years old, apparently. Grubba very funnily gives our young hero a tour of the gaudy Champions Suite and the respectable Major League locker room, but not the minor league one, because it's dirty and dilapidated. Oh well, can't take back that signature now. The contract is binding, and Mario cannot quit until Grubba releases him. Grubba coins the name The Great Gonzalez, not to be confused with the WWF wrestler Giant Gonzalez, and Jolene, his manager, shows the up-and-comer to his dingy room, where we meet and befriend a couple of fellow scrubs named King K and Bandy Andy. The former loves to hang out by the lockers and chat after bouts in the ring, but the latter prefers to take regular strolls around the Glitz Pit, which lands him in some seriously hot water later. For now, Jolene reprimands him for his curiosity about that room, reinforcing the fact that it's off limits. He, also follows Jolene, and sadly she seems to be used to that sort of thing because she'll inform Mario if he talks to her in between instructions that she doesn't date fighters. The money goes right back out the door immediately after she leaves, of course. The first real indication that there's something suspicious at play here, though, is an incident we can overhear through the thin walls of the locker room. King K shrugs it off as just some poor fighter being carted off to the hospital, but there's a voice that calmly tells the victim to keep quiet, and another asking if they've got a gag for them. Lucky for us, we know a guy who's investigating curiosities of the pit already he calls the 7 Wonders of the Glitz Pit. It's based on common Japanese urban legends / ghost stories that deal with supernatural mysteries occurring in sets of 7. Apparently, the pit has rumors and secrets in spades, but the 7 Wonders are the most peculiar. The sealed wall in the minor league locker room we can break into later is disturbingly said to contain the remains of fallen athletes. The man-eating toilet is exactly what it sounds like. A porcelain throne that's reportedly the last thing you'll ever see if you gaze upon it. That's creepy, since the only bathroom we know about in the pit is the one in the major league locker room, which is almost always occupied. The truth is, though, that the toilet's actually a man-eater because it acts as a warp pipe, allowing one to slyly and unhygienically travel between rooms. My hunch is that the horror angle was spread on purpose to make others fear the restroom, so that a certain person could sneak around the building, something I'll get into in a bit. Another wonder is an upstairs room where groaning voices come from, with no stairs to reach it, or at least stairs that aren't visible. Using Madame Flurry's wind power, we can reveal the hidden steps and climb up to the 2nd floor that's used to lock up fighters who don't follow the rules. The Champions Room is also a supposedly haunted place where you can reportedly hear the ghost whispers of athletes who lost to the champion, but the reality is that it's right next to Grubba's office, and anyone speaking from there can be heard in this room via the air ducts. Next is a strange light leaking under the ring doors when the arena's thought to be empty, but no one's been able to see inside because the doors are always locked. Bandy Andy plans to look into this one firsthand, which doesn't end well for him. Then there's the case of missing fighters who disappear for no reason, never to return. The most famous instance of this happening is with Prince Mush, the original champion of the Glitz Pit before Rock Hawk claimed the title. Lastly, we have suspicions surrounding Grubba and Jolene. The big boss has a strangely toned body, despite being past 60 years of age, and his assistant suddenly vanishes for long periods of time. A fighter claims that they once watched Jolene go into the bathroom, but never saw her come out. And yes, it's addressed that watching someone go to the bathroom is creepier. This brings me back to my theory about the man-eating toilet. Since one is able to discreetly warp between bathrooms, and Jolene disappears often, I have a feeling that she's using this unsanitary method to sneak around the building undetected. The chapter smartly sets up Jolene as the nefarious one, which is brilliant because it takes the edge away from Grubba, who is otherwise the obvious person to suspect is up to no good. Jolene, the rude executive, Rock Hawk, the narcissistic champ, or Grubba, the greasy, smooth-talking promoter. At least one of them is guilty of fishy business, so the goal of this chapter is to solve a greater mystery, all while working your way up to the top. King K mentions a stunning babe having a family-friendly juice at the fresh juice shop and asks Mario to check her out for him, but all she seems to be concerned about is Prince Mush. Now, I'm probably just dumb, because despite all of the clues, I somehow did not initially realize that this lady is Jolene. I mean, technically it's only ever alluded to, but going back to the juice bar after finishing chapter 3 and speaking with her is as close to confirmation without spelling it out completely as you can get. She says, "Who am I, you ask? You don't know? I'm someone you know quite well, actually. When I go outside the arena, I like to cut loose and shed my other personality." How can she seemingly be in 2 places at once? Well, bathroom transportation, of course. There are instances that stretch believability, where she's suddenly back at the pit in her business attire when she was just seen at the juice bar moments ago. But unlike the other NPCs in here who never move from these spots, This lady is gone during times where it really wouldn't make sense for her to be there. One example of that is taking on her trouble post-Chapter 3. Before re-registering to be a fighter in the pit, Jolyne can be spoken to at any time in the juice shop. However, accepting her trouble means meeting at her office. So, what do you know? Mysterious Juice Bar Lady is missing. Now that it's established they are the same person, we know Jolyne is going undercover, but not for anything criminal. As I just hinted at, she's doing it to find information about her missing brother by any means necessary. At the end of the chapter, Jolyne explains that she suspected foul play in the arena as soon as Mush went missing, so she got herself hired as the manager and investigated in secret. In searching for clues about her brother, she accidentally witnessed Grubba transforming, and realized he was behind her sibling's disappearance. Seeing what she was up against, Jolyne almost gave up hope, but when Mario appeared like an overalls-wearing knight, she knew after watching him fight that he was the only one who had a chance at defeating her boss, and decided to secretly guide him to learn Grubba's secret via mysterious emails sent by the name X. And receiving these emails is genuinely creepy because of a combination of 3 things. Number 1. The notification sound is the already unsettling Ice World theme from Super Mario Bros. 3. Number 2. The identity of the sender is unknown at the time. And number 3. The message is sent without a subject, composed entirely of randomly capitalized text in the vein of ransom notes. Also eerie are threatening emails to stop investigating the Crystal Star, sent by a separate anonymous party we're led to believe is Rock Hawk. But it is of course Grubba. So what exactly did he do to Mush? Well, he's had that real gold crystal star hidden beneath the arena stage all along, activating it when no one's around to power a machine that drains the essence of fighters he has no other use for. I can see this act being a metaphor for the ways in which the entertainment industry sucks the life out of its talent, but to an exaggerated degree, as Grubba is doing that in a more literal sense. This keeps Grubba's body looking forever young, but when the machine's cranked to the max, it can juice the fiend up and transform him into Macho Grubba. The cutscene building up this fight is incredible, especially with the ominous dynamic lighting of the Switch version. The Jumbotron displaying nothing but static in this scene is a perfect atmospheric touch. Anyway, like our unfortunate friends King K and Bandy Andy, Grubba caught Mush learning the secret of his power-sucking machine, and likely figured it was way too risky to trust that he'd keep quiet. So Grubba decided to sap all of the former champ's energy, presumably killing him. The Crystal Star is a miraculous thing though, so when the powered-up Grubba falls, Prince Mush's spirit descends from within the gem and his body is restored. Now, I like this sequence much better than the funny-looking original, where he was just kind of farted out from the machine. By comparison, I almost teared up during this moment of the remake. The new rendition of the music box song that plays here and during a certain very emotional moment involving Bobbery did not help. With this new scene in mind, my interpretation of what happened is that his body truly did vanish, but his fighting spirit was so strong that he persisted, and so the Crystal Star was able to revive him to his former state. Before King K and Bandy Andy had their power drained too, Prince Mush was the only named fighter known to have gone missing. But there are rumors of more, so who knows how many other victims Grubba's claimed before Mario stops him. I think Mario discovered our favorite minor league fighters just in time as well, because while they were left alive underneath this giant yellow block, they were just barely hanging in there. Bandy Andy struggled immensely just to warn him about not going near the ring when no one's around in between groans of pain, and King K couldn't even speak at all. Bandy's last words in this condition were, "I don't think I'm going to make it." They are ultimately okay in the end, but being on the verge of death like this implies to me that Grubba either left them here to die, pressed at the bottom of an immovable block, or, more likely, kept them hidden temporarily until it was time to drain them again. And maybe one more session would have caused their physical bodies to disappear into the machine like mush. There were even flies buzzing around them in the GameCube version. Speaking of, I'm not sure why the remake has an aversion to flies. They were also removed from this bandit's hideaway that was in all other respects made considerably more revolting in HD. Okay, I am now going to speak about the very first special boss you're able to fight that's exclusive to the remake. If you're someone watching who's already played the original, but not this new version, this spoiler warning goes for you too. With that said, a major question still remains. How was Rock Hawk able to defeat the former champion Prince Mush? And Grubba, for that matter, even when powered up? Before answering that, I want to figure out what exactly he's capable of. Upon clearing Chapter 3, and after clearing out the dirty battle trunks from the storage room for Jolene, an email from the first Glitz Pit champ is eventually sent to Mario's mailbox SP. It's an invitation to an exhibition match against him specially arranged by his sister. Mush has been hard at work training for his big comeback. He mentions pushing all of his limits, with the most punishing training regimen of his entire career, and he's finally seeing the results. And I'm glad we can finally see the results for ourselves in the Switch version. The Prince is truly a spectacle to behold. As a big fan of the classic N64 Paper Mario, I knew not to let my guard down as the last battle against the Toadmaster where he held nothing back was quite challenging. His fury allows him to transmute into a golden version of himself, exuding a powerful aura with 99 total heart points, the same amount as the final boss. Prince Mush, though, coming in with just slightly less HP, is far tougher than the Master at full strength ever was. Rather than a measly defense of 1, Mush has a whopping 6, the highest in the game. The only other enemy to come close is the Mooncleft with 5, but they have such little health they can be quickly disposed of by simply using a defense-ignoring item or special move. Mush, though, at 96 HP and shielded like a Toad tank, is going to take much more than that before he's taken down. The only way to crack open this mushroom of steel for punishment, who's immune to all status effects by the way, is to Super Guard. Unless you cheese him by going in with Danger Mario status and 50 Power Rush badges stacked. I also did this ridiculous thing where I fed Miss Mouse 20 hot sauces, and then for all the rest of her moves, I had her charge until she was capable of dealing 99 damage. It straight up skipped a phase. Getting back to Super Guarding though, it is an optional block the player can choose to execute during an enemy's attack by pressing B instead of A, the button pressed for a standard block right before their attack makes contact. The regular guard's timing is quite generous, and therefore useful as an easy way to soften blows by 1 point of damage, while the Super Guard timing is much more strict, requiring a near frame-perfect input to work, but when it does, it negates all points of damage, and, if the foe's attacking directly, they're hurt for 1 point. Super Guarding is a big risk, but if you practice enough and can manage to nail the action commands with regularity, it can prove to be a far better choice than the normal block. Nowhere in the game are you required to perform a Super Guard though. In fact, as a kid, I didn't even know it was a thing, so I went through the entire adventure without it. I like that the game has this mechanic seemingly designed with pro gamers in mind you don't have to engage with if you're the type who struggles with timing and doesn't want to bother taking the time to master it. This all changes with Prince Mush though, as we now have a boss with a phase in which Super Guarding is the only strategy. You see, you can render him temporarily vulnerable at any moment with this technique, but when the Prince is low on health, he'll basically go Super Saiyan, as a fiery fighting spirit burns within him. And at this point of no return, he is invincible against every move in the game besides Super Guarding. He can easily KO Mario or any one of his partners through a barrage of attacks with numbers reaching far higher than even the final boss is capable of, while charged. Seriously, it is rare for a Paper Mario enemy to deal damage in the double digits. So believe you me when I say an enemy inflicting 67 points in a single turn is unheard of before now. After some shenanigans, I was even able to manipulate his damage output without cheats, so that he deals 495 damage in 1 turn. We're getting into the weeds now, but very quickly, I acquired more than 1 double pain badge due to a developer oversight. I'll explain what that is in the comments, which allowed me to equip 4 of them at once, activating Quintuple Pain Mario, aka Mario who takes 5 times as much damage. Then, I hid in the shadows with Vivian's Veil move while Mush was charged, so he'd get mad and charge again, before unleashing the strongest move the Paper Mario series has ever seen. If you can't Super Guard against his onslaught, you'll be swiftly knocked out if your total HP isn't very high and you've got no life insurance, aka life mushrooms left on your person. Sure, a lot of this raw power is likely the result of his new training. He's said to have come back better than ever, but the thing is, even if he was at half of his current strength back when he faced Rock Hawk, the fight still would have been a cakewalk for him. The Hawk talks a big game, but let's be real, he's got 40 HP with 0 defense and boasts an attack power of 4. Yeah, he doesn't exactly fight fair, but he broke the rules during his bout with Mario and we took care of him no problem. What's the deal then? Well, I just barely said the match would have been a cakewalk, and that's the heart of the issue. Cake. Poisoned cake. Delivered to Prince Mush right before their brawl. Rock Hawk openly admits to sending one to Mario, and the poison's so strong it either completely immobilizes your party member, who will scarf it down first, requiring Mario to take on the next fight alone, or Shell Shock over here, as he'll eat it instead if you choose not to indulge. Tattling Mush reveals that he's not a fan of cake, and Goombella wonders what the story is there. Some cake-based trauma in his past? This line heavily implies that he too ate a poisoned cake from Rock Hawk right before their showdown. And then after losing, it would make all the sense in the world for Grubba, realizing that something's not right with Mush, to take the opportunity and force the weakened fighter into the empty ring so that he could siphon his essence. Macho Grubba is stronger than Rock Hawk, of course, but not so much that Mush wouldn't be able to handle him normally. Grubba did specifically say that he had to make Mush disappear because he discovered his secret, though this could be explained by Grubba dragging Mush into the ring while unconscious to drain him, without revealing how, then hiding him like King K and Bandy Andy. But Mush woke up and saw the machine for himself, so Grubba had to slurp him up completely without a trace. Whatever the case may be, let's now move from sweet poison cake to savory glizzies to wrap things up today, as Gold Bob is planning a hostile buyout of the hot dog stand run by a pig. That's pretty morbid, but you can make it worse by saving a hot dog and choosing that to be the food item you give to this starving family in Twilight Town before the mother is cursed to transform into a pig. 2 of her 3 children will be horrified about their pigified mommy, but this one on the right asks if pigs are good eaten. Back to the non-little oink-like 3-dimensional pig that is Mr. Hoggle though, he's imported a special egg from an island in the south to make his famous spotted egg dog, but this rare egg contains a rarin'-to-go Yoshi, who avoids becoming a topping on a meaty masterpiece by jumping around until Mario saves him. Well, it's actually Goombella who does the rescuing, as I couldn't help but choose the "let there be hot dogs" option. I can't not pick the funniest one, I'm sorry. Mr. Hoggle is okay with surrendering his egg he paid shipping costs for, because there's not much market for cuisine that jumps anyway. It sounds like he hasn't had an experience like this in the supposed 30 years he's been in the hot dog game, so I'd like to think that no other eggs bearing baby Yoshis were turned into a delicious delicacy. The best party member so far, Egg, eventually hatches into a Yoshi Kid that can be one of 7 colors. I got a blue one I named Boshi after a certain Mario RPG character. All he needs is a 6 set of triangle shades. Come on, King K, let me borrow yours. This mini Yoshi was born into the world inside of a rough and tumble minor league fighting pit locker room, so naturally he's got a play-it-loud Nintendo-era personality. His first word was yo, and he wants to get out into that ring the moment he emerges. This is not the type of environment to be raising an infant, but neither is Rogueport, and anything's better than turning into a spicy snack that Bulb makes you backtrack twice for. Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Doors Chapter 3 is my personal favorite, but 4 is an incredibly close runner-up, especially since the remake considerably reduced the amount of Twilight Trail backtracking, the one major complaint I had about it in the original version, by adding a fancy new warp pipe to this vacant old house. I would also say that while 3 probably boasts the darkest standalone side story, 4's got the most overtly dour atmosphere, rivaled only by the final chapter. I mean, the mayor's name is literally dour. We've got to give it to For Pigs the Bell Tolls, the second Ernest Hemingway reference in Paper Mario, the first being the bumpty penguin novelist Herringway from the N64 game Shiver City. And like the spirit of that deceased Toad inhabiting Cabin 4 on the XS Express, this is another instance of 4 representing death, a well-known superstition in Japan I spoke about in episode 1. In order to even get to this morose municipality, Mario must travel down a special orange-colored cross-hatched pipe that'll reject anyone who doesn't have something with their name written on it. This information is learned by Darkly, the lover of dark places who hails from Twilight Town, but opts to loiter in the shadows behind Merlin's place in Rogueport these days. I'd say he fits right in. Darkly Aspects over here helps Mario by writing the plumber's name on the seat of his overalls, and our partner's name on their polka dot diaper pants. As suggested by the name, Twilight Town is stuck in a perpetual state of twilight. It's first presented to us with a shot of a magenta to orange-yellow gradient sky, with a stunning moon hanging above a long line of bare trees in the distance. As the camera pans down, we see dead leaves floating on by, and Mario emerges to be welcomed by a local named Gloomer, who says it's a bad time to arrive. This doesn't mean anything special by itself, but the line is made especially funny because of all the male Twilighters were given a voice very reminiscent of a certain blue-eyed Undertale character. I wonder if the sound designers did that on purpose. Visually, they all look like living hand-sewn dolls wearing hoods with shadows covering half of their faces, which complements the creepy aesthetic. The mayor introduces himself by stating that he isn't exactly the sharpest fellow, and I think that's because you have a few stitches loose, dude. Look, poor guy's even got some fluff exposed through the busted seams on top of his head. Anyway, Gloomer warns that the bad time they're about to have is too scary a tale to tell. But we know it involves the giant bell at Creepy Steeple, because he panics when it rings, wondering who it's going to be next, before exploding into a purple cloud that dissipates to reveal a swine in the spot where Gloomer once stood. You see, whenever the bell tolls, a resident is chosen at random to be poofed into a pig. It's implied from partner dialogue that visitors are at risk of being oinkified as well. But this sadly cannot happen to our main characters, no matter how long the player dawdles. I think that would have been a nice addition to the handful of non-standard game overs TTYD is so fond of. That being said, Mario's party does meet many more NPCs who become bores as part of the plot, like the mayor himself, and this gatekeeper who initially blocks access to the path ahead, but can do nothing to stop progress when he's reduced to trotting on all fours. While the newly orchestrated rendition of the town tune has grown on me, and I do think I prefer it overall, I'll admit that the original sounds far scarier. The song on GameCube had the shrill, eerie chords played alongside what sounds like a theremin with occasional chimes and a constant vibraphone in the background. The instrumentation was rather sparse, giving each one a separate emphasis that made for a piece that was altogether semi-discordant and unnerving. The updated track brings in a slew of new instruments for a much fuller sound, like an accordion that gives it a very Nightmare Before Christmas feel. Vocals are always appreciated, but I'm a bit torn on the strings in this case. It makes the piece sound somber and sad rather than spine-chilling in my opinion. Actually, back in 5th grade I remember the original really freaking out one of my friends. The combination of the music and general vibe of the place was so upsetting to them that they had their mom, who was luckily also really into Nintendo games, play Chapter 4 in their stead. The fact that Gloomer and Eve, the mother of 3 I mentioned in the last video, are the only Twilighters you can actually witness transforming firsthand is played with quite well. We're told by the teary-eyed wife of the Twilight shop manager that he went into the woods yesterday to collect herbs, but a pig came home instead of her husband. She blames herself because they got into a fight, and she had called him a chauvinist pig before he left, but now he really is one. I know I keep talking about how surprised I am at this dialogue, but really, seeing chauvinist pig in a Mario game definitely made me do a double take. In a funny twist, this pig isn't actually her husband at all. It's Dupree, the flirty Disco Dugan, which, alongside the Traveling Sisters 3, proves the theory that anyone visiting here can be subject to the curse. Even as a literal pig, Dupree must have been drawn into the shop by the fetching young woman, because if we trust what he's saying, everything that's happened to him upon arriving in town via the pipe is fuzzy. I won't talk too much more about this, better save it in case I bring back my Nintenduendo series, but the shopkeeper must have walked in on this younger, kind of handsome Elvis impersonator about to make some moves on his wife, because the two of them will be fervently quarreling once the curse is lifted. He's scared to ask what his spouse and Dupree were doing in here while he was gone, but ultimately nothing happened. She just makes a joke about trading her husband in for this strapping young fellow. But who's responsible for turning Twilight Town into one big pig pen anyway? That'd be a supposed monster who's taken up residence at the top of the bell tower. Since the air of this place is so fearful, you might be expecting some nightmarish creature to be responsible for tormenting the townsfolk. But like the crazy daisies of Twilight Trail, there's a bit of mood whiplash in the boss's design. Rather than a ghastly ghost, a la Bogmire of Luigi's Mansion, this enemy, whose name is a complete mystery, even to Goombella's all-knowing Book of Tattles, is a bedsheet ghost in the vein of Scooby-Doo's The Phantom of Haunted Isle. Except made even sillier because he's rocking a wizard-slash-party hat with a very stylish blue bow tie. He belongs to a Paper Mario exclusive species called Duplighost, first introduced in the N64 game mainly as tricksters who deceive travelers by shapeshifting into people familiar to them. There are friendly Duplighosts, as evidenced by Lee, a student of the Toadmaster, but nevertheless, in battle, they take advantage of their ability to create complete copies of Mario's friends, even down to their movesets. It's no different in TTYD, though this baddie without a name chooses to become a clone of Mario himself, in a more cinematic cutscene where the camera zooms in intensely and his eyes glow red. A magic ring then scans Mario from head to toe, and when the ghoul reappears, he's taken the shape of Mr. Video, albeit all purple, like he's a perfect shadow of Mario. He speaks with a deeper, echoey Charles Martinet voice that sounds like a deranged Mickey Mouse. And unlike the real deal, his dialogue implies that he makes this annoying yuck 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 laugh. The fight proceeds as usual. Mario beats the imposter, who collapses and relinquishes the Ruby Star, while the typical celebratory end of chapter cleared sequence plays out. But something's not quite right. First of all, this has been the shortest chapter by far. The narration even lampshades this fact by stating, "At this rate, Mario's quest to collect all 7 crystal stars will be done in no time." Secondly, I can see newcomers who aren't completely paying attention missing this, but quote-unquote Mario is off. He doesn't do his usual "yeah" when holding up the crystal star, and before walking over to collect it, you'll notice that he's uncharacteristically hunched over, just like our unnamed villain was as a Mario copy. Most striking though is the fact that the apparent real Mario's eyes have changed from cute thin ovals to wide, soulless black circles with faint red outlines that give the impression his body is being possessed. That's because it is, in a sense. Goombella throws an insult at who she thinks is the fainted doppelganger, and the pair head back to town, but there isn't any kind of a transition. The camera doesn't move at all. As you see, this purple shade is the genuine Mario. Now, I'm not going to argue that this is the most amazing narrative twist ever or anything like that, but as a kid, it was pretty mind-blowing to experience for the first time, and this concept is still really cool to me as an adult. Mario's voice, body, and even his name have been taken over by the boss. And while his partners are skeptical of their leader's new mannerisms, they haven't yet picked up on the fact that he's an imposter. The back-to-normal Twilighters are none the wiser and commemorate their supposed savior with high praise. The mayor even hosts a feast in his honor, the main course being a pig roast. Here we go again with the developer's morbid jokes. I thought being able to feed the family whose mother just became a pig with a hot dog was bad. The legitimate Jumpman is largely ignored by everyone, now that he's become a literal shadow of his former self. The gatekeeper says that he looks kind of weird and that he'd classify him as a bad guy. This woman compliments hijacked Mario's sense of fashion, with a description that changes whether or not the players equip the W emblem, by the way, while lightly criticizing the plain purple person who stands before her. Some incredible, albeit easily missable new text comes from the Battle Master. If you speak to him as Shadow Mario, he'll say, "Don't think I seen your lack of mug before though. You got a name, tall, dark, and faceless?" Mario explains that his name was stolen, and the Battle Master responds with, "I'm gonna call you Nameless Frank for now." Between Murphy, Marty-O, Gonzalez, Slick, and now Nameless Frank, Mario's been called quite a number of unique names on this adventure with more to come. Anyway, the walk back to town is lonely, and the Twilight Town music doesn't even play when you get there. All of the background tracks have been replaced with ambient, cursed versions, adding to the unsettling feeling of it all. Right before that, a familiar face tears a hole in the sky, and that voice clip I mentioned earlier is used to great effect in reintroducing him. This dude taunts Mario, explaining that what he's done goes beyond simply changing his shape into anyone he wants. He's effectively replacing Mario by taking his name and body for himself. And that's turned the real hero into a shadow who can't use his own name. It means that he's stuck in Twilight Town until this gets resolved, because remember, you need a name to access the pipe. That begs the question, are they both trapped here for the time being? Because this villain's name is currently obscured? Could he use the name Mario to leave right now, or would he have to first succeed in erasing the original to fully take his place? It's a scary thought. If he wasn't having so much fun teasing Mario and just did away with him immediately, I imagine the shadow we're currently playing as would fade into nothingness. Would the person who was Mario cease to exist, with the entirety of himself being irreversibly transferred over to the enemy? Do all Duplighosts have this power, or just Duplighosts? I've got to wonder how many Duplighosts are out there who successfully stole the complete identity of a Toad or something, simply picking up where their lives left off. I don't know how much the writers actually thought of this, but it is chilling. Before that happens to Mario, there's got to be a way to undo this in the present, right? As I just mentioned, fake Mario has turned this into a game, and if the player can guess his real name, then he'll give up his hold on Mario's name and body. Hey, that's easy, I know his name already, it's Duplighost. The problem is that even if you're replaying the game and have got it memorized, the lowercase p is unusable. This isn't just a letter of his name the developers arbitrarily removed though. An actual plot point is to retrieve the letter P this character stole from your keyboard. Okay, the name and body were one thing, but taking away my rights to a letter is one step too far. There's a lot of power in a name though, so fighting him without guessing is fruitless as he's become invincible to this nobody. For the time being, you're supposed to run away because you can't damage him yet. But I just so happen to have Luigi in my audience, so I wanted to see if he'd root for the real Mario. And would you look at that? Brothers do know best. He only cheers for the player, so he has to be the only person who has any kind of relationship with Mario, other than the identity thief of course, to know what's really going on here. I'd ask why Luigi can't just get up on stage and help him, but he's kind of supposed to be racing on Circuit Break Island right now anyway. We're not supposed to think too much about when he attends these shows. I think we're also supposed to look past the rare chance of him being eaten by a piranha plant if they're both in the crowd. Let's just consider ourselves brotherless, as well as bodiless for now, and take solace in the fact that there is at least one soul in this dreary place who can truly help out, beyond an encouraging fist pump. That future friend is a fellow shadow, Vivian. In yet another little story twist, the youngest of the three Shadow Sirens Mario fought previously joins the good side. Though it isn't a heel-face turn, Vivian doesn't know she's helping Mario at first. The Shadow Trio is actually in Twilight Town to try and put an end to the hero's quest, with a lethal bomb. The Super Bomb is a weapon that looks suspiciously like a hand grenade with a massive blast radius. But the thing is missing, and it's broken. Beldum tries to gaslight Vivian into thinking she's the one who lost it, while also belittling her as usual, and leaves with Marilyn to take a supposed well-earned siesta, while the hapless fire mage is made to search for it lest she be punished again. Mario locates the busted-up bomb that's intended to be a deadly present for him, and even offers to fix it. I knew he was a jack of all trades, but I wasn't aware that Mario was a bomberman too. Vivian tells him it's no use. I guess she's also an explosives expert. But thanks him anyway, and the two start to bond. She says Mario is the only person who's ever been kind to her. A disturbing thought. I know she's the youngest of the three shadows, but Beldum is over 1,000 years old. So I wonder how many hundreds of years Vivian has been alive with no one showing her respect. Despite the severity of his own problems, he stopped to hear about Vivian's, so she repays the kindness by partnering up with him. The endearing witch has no qualms about leaving her abusive sisters, and explains that their standard bullying has started to feel heavier after she realized she was their sister, not their brother. That's right. In the remake of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, Vivian is revealed without a shadow of doubt to be a transgender woman. I was absolutely expecting Nintendo to keep her gender identity as vague as possible in an attempt to avoid any sort of controversy, but no. Here it is plain as day, or Twilight. Vivian is unquestionably a trans woman, and that fact has sparked a lot of discourse online. Some fans are convinced that the intention of the original Japanese GameCube version was for her to be an otokonoko, a Japanese term for men who express themselves in a traditionally feminine manner, i.e. cross-dressing. Now, I know this is a sensitive subject, so believe me when I say I took this research seriously, and I am confident that I have found an answer to the question of whether or not she was always intended to be trans. For this to be thorough, I had to take all mention of her gender into account, so I will start with every official claim that she is male before any rebuttal. Please hear me out until the time displayed on screen, and carefully listen to all of what I have to say on the matter before angrily heading to the comments section. Using text exclusively from the Japanese game scripts themselves, let's take a look at the following lines from TTYD and Super Paper Mario. Number 1. In TTYD's party member description, she's described as a feminine-looking boy. A direct translation of the Japanese text, courtesy of the cutting room floor, reads, "A former member of the Shadow Trio. He may look like a girl, but he's actually a boy." Number 2. Goombella quote-unquote corrects herself after quote-unquote mistaking him for a girl via her tattle. Translation: it's Vivian, a member of the Shadow Trio and the youngest sister, no wait, brother. Number 3. In Super Paper Mario, the follow-up to TTYD, Vivian's catch card deliberately describes the character as a boy. Translation: one of Mario's partners, introduced in Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. A cute boy wielding fire magic who was once part of a group of enemies known as the Shadow Trio. That all being said, do you notice a pattern here? Not one of these 3 examples is information coming from Vivian herself. It's all through menu text or other characters speaking for her. What does Vivian have to say about her own gender identity in the original game? Well, her pronoun of choice is atai, which is generally used by female characters with rough, brash attitudes, and by some transgender characters. Clyde Mandolin, Legends of Localization. And Vivian affectionately refers to their group as the Shadow Sisters, a fact that angers Beldam, who reminds her that she is a quote-unquote man, as an insult because it upsets Vivian. She's identified as a woman since the beginning, with everyone else labeling her as a man. And you know what? That's wrong. You have to remember that this game was released in the early 2000s, so Goombella and the menu descriptions having mislabeled her are prime examples of the outdated ways in which transgender characters have often been depicted in the past. Sadly as a joke, in the vein of Birdo/Catherine in the Doki Doki Panic and Super Mario USA instruction manuals. Translation by the Mushroom Kingdom. He thinks he is a girl and he spits eggs from his mouth. He'd rather be called Kathy. Taking that all into consideration, I think it's obvious the original intention of the writers was always to depict Vivian as a trans woman. But what that means today is very different from what it meant 2 decades ago. Now, if you still aren't convinced that Vivian was trans in the original too, I will allow discussion about her gender identity in the comments. But if there is even a hint of transphobia in your response, I will delete it without hesitation, if the Beldam speech bubbles don't get there first. I have already had to do this several times in my episode on Paper Mario Color Splash, and that was the result of a non-serious joke I made about Bowser being an LGBTQ+ ally because he wanted a rainbow shell. I'm all for freedom of speech, but if you're just going to be mean, I will banish that free speech to the Shadow Realm. And that's where Vivian's veil leads, so you're gonna have to deal with her too. That was quite a tangent, so where were we again? Oh yeah, it's time to team up with an awesome new party member to put an end to the chapter boss's antics. Using Vivian's ability that conveniently paves a path forward, we finally learn Duplus's true name from his pet parrot. Stealing back the stolen P, that is not a sentence I thought I'd be saying today, I can now say without fear of censorship that his name is Duplus. Duplus the Duplighost. That Shine Get homage to the Japanese version of Super Mario Sunshine is brilliant too. In fact, the birds in this game seriously have some of the best lines of dialogue ever. These learned crows, for example, discuss how depressed they are about the depletion of fossil fuels, and the dire need to look for a renewable energy source. This text was left unchanged, which is equal parts impressive and sad because it just goes to show that nothing's changed in 20 years. with the monster's name in our brain, heading back and spelling it out for him, with the once rigged keyboard causes Duplis's black holes for eyes to turn all white, and the camera zooms in closer and closer as he shakes in surprise, mouth agape. The screen then starts flipping around rapidly with a ghosting effect, as he screams again and again repeatedly before jumping in a panic and hightailing it back to his hideout. Vivian should know by now just by looking at him that she's helping Super Mario get his body back, but it doesn't hit her until his name is spoken out loud atop the bell tower preceding the true showdown. Vivian leaves before the rematch begins, but only temporarily, as she comes back upon realizing that Mario's the best companion for her. Fun fact, in the original GameCube version, if you were strong enough to finish this fight before Vivian rejoins Mario, the boss battle would end and she'd just be by his side like nothing happened. This cutscene of her declaring that she's officially switched sides can be totally missed. This was cleverly fixed in the Switch version. Finishing Duplis off solo Shadow style results in him using a life mushroom to revive. He will not pull this card under any other circumstance, so it's a quirk unique to defeating him early. I personally think that the battle is a little too easy overall anyway, but you can make things more challenging by only attacking Duplis once all of his accidental betrayal partners have been knocked out. This doesn't really do anything for the player, as causing Mario's friends to faint understandably doesn't award any experience points, but you do get flavor text where they apologize for failing him, and Duplis cruelly just groans in frustration. The first time you give the actual boss a good smack, he'll say this awkward line exclusive to the remake. What? Damage? Gah, that's right! You guessed my name and now stuff hurts sometimes. I guess it helps reaffirm the fact that his powers of invulnerability do indeed come from keeping his name a secret. I imagine it's a fortifying magic spell that can only be broken by guessing it. If that idea seems pretty random to you, I will say that it makes much more sense when you consider his name in Japanese, Ranperu, or Rumpel, short for Rumpelstiltskin, which is of course a German fairy tale where an imp lays claim on the firstborn child of a miller's daughter, unless she can guess his name within a certain amount of days. Rather than from a parrot, she learns his name straight from the horse's mouth, when he reveals it in a song with lyrics gloating about how she'll never guess the name Rumpelstiltskin. Felling the counterfeit Mario, and knockoff Rumpelstiltskin, finally dispels the illusion. His partners are shocked to see that they've been fighting on the wrong side all this time. I mean, you'd think that them being on stage left, the enemy side, rather than right for the encounter would be enough of an indication, but as you're more than likely aware, there's a lot in this chapter that doesn't make the most sense. How is the shopkeeper able to keep track of Mario's points when he's a shadow? I'd say let's just chalk it up to more video game logic and move on. Duplis gets angry, flying out of the window like in the Grimm's fairy tales in their original form version of the story, minus riding a cooking ladle. Mario's friends apologize profusely for mistaking their dear Mario for another, and are hesitant about Vivian at first, but agree to welcome her to the party after he sticks up for her. What of Duplis? Well, the three shadows are down to 2 now, so Beldam and Marilyn add him to their ensemble. And that actually pans out quite well for them because his identity theft shenanigans will cause a whole lot of trouble in the chapters to come. If I had a nickel for every time a Bob-omb had a tragic backstory in a Paper Mario game on Switch, I'd have 2 nickels. Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right? Welcome to Dark Aspects of Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door Part 4. Where I'll be investigating chapters 5 and 6 under a magnifying glass, like the improbably large-brained Pennington. As I alluded to from the jump, we've got to start things off with sad aspects, as Admiral Bobbery, the last member of the Mario crew, has some major trauma that needs to be worked through before he can help others save the world. You see, the next crystal star is revealed via magical map to be somewhere on the haunted isle of Keelhaul Key, all the way across the ocean. There are no kind talking whales Mario can ride this time, and despite being a great swimmer, he's no Junior Troopa, so the only way is via a vessel that's a little more grounded, or floated in reality. Either way, it's a boat, and the butte we're taking is owned by the rich and foppish Flavio, who'd love to tag along with Mario, or rather make Mario tag along with him. Because let's be real, he's the true main character, on an adventure to shake up his life that's been rather uneventful as of late. Flavio is no helmsman though, and his navigator ran off, likely because of the many unsavory rumors about their destination. Evil curses and vengeful spirits, ships that have sailed out never to return. Some dock workers are scared to even say the name Keelhaul Key out loud, knowing that the ghost of the dread pirate king Cortez might be listening. A new master helmsman is going to be needed to steer everyone through the deathly dangerous waters leading to the cursed land. Luckily, such a seafarer has surprisingly settled down in Rogueport. Bobbery, a once legendary sailor who became a ground-bound recluse after his wife Scarlet passed away some time ago. He pretends not to be Bobbery at first, though to be fair, I wouldn't give any information out to some random people who stumbled into my living room through the chimney either, and tells the intruders to get out. He's not very forceful about it though, because you can just not listen and enter his suspiciously nautically decorated study instead, then steal his shine sprite. I feel like he's the type that'd ordinarily not hesitate to blast these thieves into next Wednesday, but right now the poor old guy is tired and just wants to be left alone without having to deal with the confrontation. I'm about to get real for a moment here, but I've felt this kind of lethargy before when I struggled with depression as an older teenager. It can leave you in a state of resignation where your other emotions sort of shut down. So you really only feel empty and act unresponsive in situations where another person would be angry, for example. A traumatic event can especially inhibit one's emotional range, which I imagine is what Bobbery is going through with the loss of his wife. The old Babam is coping by pushing everyone else out, choosing to live in isolation because he feels he deserves it. You see, Scarlet suddenly succumbed to an inexplicable deathly illness while he was out at sea, which meant that Bobbery wasn't there to possibly nurse her to health. Because of this, he blames himself for her passing. In his eyes, he put the love of his profession before the love of his life. And so in his guilt-ridden grief, he embraced self-punishment by swearing off of sailing forever. The pervasive thoughts that he could have saved her began tormenting Bobbery at night, haunting his sleep. But for the sake of morality and game progression, Mario can't choose to let the dejected old soul be, resulting in Podley, Bobbery's old friend, the barkeep who was by Scarlet's side on her deathbed, giving Mario a letter she wrote to Bobbery just before leaving this world. This Super Mario world. Sorry. Now, a lot of TTYD fans do not like Podley, and honestly, looking back through this cutscene, it's easy to see why. Scarlet was very specific in life, and entrusted Podley to hand her husband the letter should she pass away without seeing him again, and if Bobbery winds up blaming himself for her death. Both of these fears came true, but instead of respecting her final request and directly delivering these last words to her husband, Podley took it upon himself, without even knowing the contents of the note, to keep it from him because he didn't want to risk adding to Bobbery's misery. From my perspective, I do agree that Podley was absolutely in the wrong here. However, I can understand his hesitation, especially since we don't know the true extent of Bobbery's emotional state upon first hearing the news. Obviously, he was in shock and distress, but what if it were even worse than that? It's not at all a stretch to believe that if these characters were real and not living in a Mario game, that Bobbery could have been having thoughts of ending his own life. Perhaps Podley worried that relinquishing the letter too soon would push Bobbery to make a decision he wouldn't be able to come back from. Do remember that Podley was a close family friend Scarlet trusted enough to assign this vital task to, so he has to know Bobbery and his history better than we ever could simply parsing what little backstory we're given. That being said, it doesn't excuse Podley's choice to safeguard the message in secret. He didn't want to take any sort of chance, so he intervened and it wound up being the wrong move. Scarlet's voice of reassurance is something that Bobbery really needed to hear sooner rather than later, but Podley gatekept this step to the old sailor's recovery against Scarlet's wishes. Podley may have had good intentions, but his meddling left Bobbery in a despondent stagnation for who knows how long. I always assumed the span of time between then and now to be many years. Scarlet mentions in her letter that her life was short, so if Bobbery is an old man in the present, and if they married somewhat young, she could have passed decades ago. Podley might have inadvertently ruined a considerable chunk of this man's life. As you'll soon learn too, Podley is a terrible decision maker overall when it comes to the loved ones in his life. Podley's ex-girlfriend Eve from Twilight Town, for example, never truly recovered from her broken heart after he dumped her. And the lack of a resolution still bothers her to this day, so much so that she's now asking for help on a community bulletin board at the Rogueport Trouble Center. Eve explains that the two were once deeply in love, and had a happy, shabby life together roughing it out in a small apartment. They both dreamed to be stars of the musical stage, but when Eve finally had a breakthrough and was offered a role as leading lady in a prominent play, Podley left her without saying goodbye, leaving behind only a crass, quickly scrawled note that said, "My dear, I would only dim your bright future. Farewell." Of course, this clumsy breakup caught Eve off guard. Her dream wasn't to be a star that shines alone. Success meant nothing to her without her partner, and so she didn't even show up to the rehearsal. Eve gave up on her dreams and tried to forget about her lover. She wound up marrying another man and found a different kind of happiness living as a mother. Though, after hearing a rumor that Podley was running a Chocola shop in Rogueport, she had to at least see her first love again after all this time. But you know what? Podley couldn't even do that for her. He pretends that he knows no such person, and simply requests that Mario tell this Eve person to live in the moment before shooing him away. It's only under his breath that he mutters, "Oh, my Eve." Clearly, he hasn't forgotten about her, but that's the message he wants relayed. So Eve will likely live the rest of her life thinking that her complicated, nostalgic feelings are one-sided. She will be much happier if you choose to make something up quick and tell her the feelings are mutual, which is actually closer to the truth. But I think the first option is still best, as the man is kind of an asshat, so let's let him burn his bridges. Eve, you're better off without him. That's enough side questing though. Let's get back to Bobry and his late wife. Quote, "Though you will mourn, I beg that you remember that time, like love, is a tide. You are one with the sea, as you were one with me. Do not lose both your life's loves." Unquote. Upon finally reading these validating words, Bobry takes a moment to collect himself in private.
Cue the explosion noise.
And takes the next step to healing by agreeing to make the ultimate voyage. Mario and many other NPCs with their own reasons to leave Rogueport are now bound for Keelhaul Key aboard Flavio's rather expensive ship. A neat little quirk of this chapter is that it begins and ends with diary entries written by the eccentric trader himself. Things are literally smooth sailing until the third night, where his tale of battling a man-eating sea serpent is interrupted by blue flame spirits inspired by Onibi, demon fire yokai of Japanese folklore, simply called embers here. After the first of these fiery ghouls looms over poor Papacha's shoulder, storm clouds form overhead and more specters begin taking shape, bringing with them an ominous fog that obscures the waters ahead. Not before long, an entire horde of embers surround the adventurers and cause Flavio to nearly pass out in terror. Bobry tries to keep everyone calm, but the ghostly, oohing things are quick to send him overboard. Next is the totally not Lord Crump in disguise, followed by a toad, and then everyone as the boat's torn apart and sinks into the drink. Thankfully, because they were all so close to their destination, they all wash up on Keelhaul Key, but someone is missing from their group. Someone very important. Where's the green toad? Flavio mourns this friend, along with Four Eyes and Admiral Bobry, 3 lost souls assumed to have been taken by the ghostly Pirate King. Enough time passes that the shipwrecked crew constructs a semblance of civilized life on the island using the boat's flotsam, surviving on whatever supplies the seafloor hasn't yet laid claim to. Washed up timbers provide protection from the elements, while everyone subsists on soggy sea salty bread. Including the 3 days and 3 nights spent sailing, it's been about a full week from the initial departure until the time the player is able to take control of Mario once again. With still no sign of Bobry or the others, The known survivors have grown a bit restless and began arguing, then threatening each other with violence. The future is uncertain, but things are looking pretty grim as the not-so-friendly neighborhood ghosts continue to torment the hapless foreigners. Mario is voluntold to explore this eerie place, and he eventually does find a roughed-up Bobbery on the verge of death, or so it seems. He reportedly sacrificed himself to save his fellow crew members, and makes one last request before his final rest: a sip of vintage red, or Chocola-Cola in the US version. This spirited beverage is Bobbery's last memory of Scarlet he was initially saving to celebrate their arrival on land. He's coughing, hacking, and moaning while struggling to even speak, as evidenced by the shaky text. So if you weren't spoiled by the promotional video ads revealing him to be a full-fledged party member, you'd be inclined to believe that this character is going to be joining his wife soon. Upon finding and delivering the treasured bottle, Bobbery says his supposed last words and slowly shuts his eyes. The wheel on his back even stops turning, and attempting to speak with him again reveals nothing but dots. A smack of Mario's trusty hammer ought to change that. One swift blow to the cranium wakes Bobbery from his delirium, and our latest party member joins the cause. Speaking of hitting living persons with hammers, I think now's a better time than ever to speak about Waka, a talking, infectiously chipper blue mole returning from the Nintendo 64 Paper Mario. According to the wise Russ T from that game, Wakas have sadly become an endangered species because they've been hunted for the valuable, edible Waka bumps they drop when hit. The Waka on Mount Rugged is said to be the last one, and the player can actually make it disappear forever from their save file if they get too greedy. Waka bumps are incredible healing items after all, and they do sell for lots of coins. The only Waka left in TTYD's world lives here on Keelhaul Key, and the player can similarly abuse the innocent creature for its precious yield until it seemingly vanishes for good. Waka clearly doesn't enjoy being hit and asks you to stop, but ignoring his basic rights and attacking him repeatedly doesn't seem to have any obvious consequences until the 5th bonk. After that, the little fella will no longer speak clearly, with ellipses breaking up his sentences. He mentions getting headaches as of late, and Waka forgets who Mario is. In fact, he's no longer confident he knows his own name. So, at this point, even if the player stops, it's implied they've already inflicted a traumatic brain injury upon this protected animal. The cruel thing is, though, the game encourages you to do it. And the Switch remake is even worse, for reasons I'll get into at some point. For now, just know that the player's morality is challenged in an unexpected way with this, mechanic. Despite Waka bumps being some of the best consumable items in the game, I honestly could only stand to get one of them because I felt bad hitting the guy. This was before knowing that the developers added a little extra something if you play Whack-A-Mole one too many times, so my initial kindness wound up not mattering because, like with Undertale, my determination to 100% a game will always outweigh any moral lesson said game is trying to teach me. Let's leave behind the mole with a migraine for now and head into the deepest reaches of the Pirate's Grotto. That's, funnily enough, right on the other side of the wall where Waka hangs out. To reach that special area, we have to get Mario afflicted with a deceptively helpful curse that allows him to fold into a paper boat by the spirit of an ancient Koopa hero trapped inside this black chest. I've spoken about these 4 quote-unquote chest demons at great length in part 1, but I wanted to mention while we're here that this time, Mario asks to be spared the theatrics and just given the cool new ability disguised as a hex. The demon is sad that Mario is unsurprised and doesn't want to hear the speech he's been practicing for a millennium, calling him a twisted little guy for it. Of course, Mario shakes his head yes in response. Wait, what? But has to sit through the usual spiel again anyway. This interaction is my favorite of the 4 for this reason, and because after shouting "Suffer" 3 times in all caps, he dials it back and with a look of grave concern says, "Wait, that's maybe too much. Are you alright? That didn't really hurt, did it?" Only after checking to make sure he didn't go too far does he laugh and start hurling ridiculous insults once more. Then, when it's all over, he thanks Mario for letting him put on his show, and the last of the old heroes is finally freed. All that's left now is to sail onward into the den of the Pirate King, his dusty old ship containing all of the spoils he gathered in life. Sick of the charade, Captain Cortez drops the crying ghost act in his introduction and faces Mario as the giant floating skull he's become. A cold-blooded villain who robs innocents of life and loot, as he so elegantly puts it. After threatening to turn Mario's mustache into a bone polisher, the sinister skull lunges forth and the curtains rise to reveal his full skeletal glory. I'd say this is probably the coolest looking boss in the game, besides the tail dragons. Cortez's many arms allow him to quadruple wield a hook, a cutlass, a rapier, and a longsword he can stab and slash with. His second form creepily looks a little snake-like. He drops said weapons and his limbs so that he's reduced to only a body, with a long spine extending out from his bone pile, featuring an exposed core in his chest cavity. Cortez can intimidatingly charge up to throw a mess of spiky bones, but with a small amount of heart points per phase, you won't be sweating too much. At 0 HP, the pieces that make up this spooky scary skeleton begin to fall apart, and the light temporarily leaves his eyes as the head comes crashing down. It's not over yet though, as his last stand is a face-off, not just against his face, but also his now floating spirit swords. Luckily, both the weapons and his bones have become brittle, so in Goombella's words, it's time to give this tormented spirit some eternal rest. However, in a funny fake-out, winning the fight results in earning star points as usual, and the fiend shrinks like he's going to vamoose for good. But then the floating head just grows back to normal size for him, and explains that he can't die because he's already dead. His spirit is forever tied to the vast wealth that surrounds him. It's a good thing this Marauder is actually a pretty cool dude. Sure, you can't date him, but he actually helps Mario upon learning that he's not all that interested in stealing stolen booty. Except for the Sapphire Star, Cortez doesn't even care about anymore. The Koopa hero from earlier couldn't make it to his desired final resting place 1,000 years ago and was forced to settle for a dank cave because Cortez just had to steal the apparently unimpressive gem, keeping him alive. Well, what matters is that he's a sweetie in the afterlife, eventually offering to ferry Mario and friends to and from the island whenever they please. Using Goombella's area title here reveals that she wouldn't mind pocketing some of Cortez's treasure, which is funny because she yelled at Mario in Chapter 3 for suggesting they swipe Rockhawk's belt. Stealing is wrong, unless it's from pirates. Anyway, that's 5 crystal stars down with just 2 to go. So far, we've traveled the world via warp pipe, blimp, and sailboat, so what's next? Cannon? Nope, not yet. It's a train! Poshley Heights is where the next star lies. A rich neighborhood inhabited by Bumpties who miss their homeland Shiver City, which I guess is the Paper Mario universe equivalent to Canada, because they say things like, yeah, you betcha, and A.
Canadians, they're the type of players I'm thinking about.
Like the N64 game, this penguin-filled chapter begins with a crime-solving theme, but thankfully Mario isn't accused of murder this time. The only murder here is the Agatha Christie novel that likely very loosely inspired this on-rails segment. Vivian's big sister Beldam and her rowdy replacement Dupless sure do try though, by way of a death threat made to sound silly so that the writers could get away with a villain plotting to blow up a train. The smartly dressed big blue rat on board, and by smartly dressed I mean glasses and a handsome blue tie, is traveling for business purposes and happens to be transporting a strange new product from his company called Nitro Honey Syrup. Rather than restoring FP, it supposedly has the power to raise the dead. Instead of assembling a zombie army though, Beldam plans on mixing 2 other ingredients into this secret sauce to concoct a type of blasting jelly.
Careful with the blasting jelly.
With the Time Bomb, Super Bomb, and this yummy, sticky, gooey bomb, plus the cannon and a certain self-destruct sequence we'll see in Chapter 7, there are a lot more explosive plot elements in this game than I remembered there being. Not to worry though, as Mario puts the kibosh on this kaboom. However, another would-be killer lurks in the shadows of Riverside Station, the Smorgs. What are Smorgs, you may be asking? Well, I don't really have an answer to that, because I'm not entirely sure either. Did the developers even know? All we can glean is that they're these creatures who look and act like fuzzies, but don't speak in full sentences, only shouting the name of their species, and rather than fur, their bodies appear to be made of smog. Their origin is unknown, but because of the Shadow Sirens meddling in this chapter, my headcanon is that Beldam used some sort of black magic to create them from the train smokestack. And in fact, there was a rumor about an unused cutscene where Beldam summoned Smorg that, according to Reddit user PichuMaster3000, started in 2009 on a gaming forum and spread via the Paper Mario and Super Mario wikis, when a user by the name of Steuben Rubin claimed, without any proof, to own an early version of TTYD that wasn't the Paper Mario 2 demo disc. Steuben described the supposed cut Beldam sequence, among other changes between the final release and his alleged special copy dubbed Beta 9. Unfortunately, it turns out this was all a hoax that was only allowed to persist because Mr. Rubin was a bureaucrat on the Super Mario Wiki. There is sadly nothing in the final game or on the cutting room floor that actually suggests Smorg was summoned by the witch, besides this cut line that might not even be referring to Smorg. I just like to pretend it was the writer's intention as an explanation for how this one-off threat came to be and its motivation. I guess one thing the Smorgs have going for them, and why I'm even talking about this at all for Dark Aspects, is that because there's no reason given for their presence, they have this otherworldly alien quality that's sort of scary, as their apparent purpose is to cause chaos. The build-up to their attack on the train is pretty effectively unsettling too. On the morning of the infestation, Mario can explore each cabin like normal, but will very abnormally find no one else on board. Each room is empty where there were once guests, and even the driver finds things to be quite quiet. Like an oversized insect, a single Smorg pops onto the windshield, followed by a few more, and then enough to overtake every single window on the train, darkening the interior so the only thing you can see clearly are their glowing yellow eyes peering through the glass. If you try to buy anything from the gift shop at this time, you'll have to wake up the owner, who's blacked out on the ground. It's only until trekking all the way back to the caboose where you'll find the waitress and conductor being overtaken by the Cumulus Cretins. Shaking in fear, they explain that the two of them, and all of the other paying passengers, must have been stolen away in their sleep. As far as why exactly, again, that isn't explained. Their goal could be to consume as many people as possible, adding to their collective swarm, or it could just be that they like terrorizing innocents. Again, I think the Smorgs being a hive mind organism created by Beldam with the sole purpose of slowing down Mario would make a ton of sense. Nevertheless, climbing onto the roof reveals that copious amounts of these gross, flippy-floppy fellows have completely covered the XS Express. The countless cloud clumps then conjoin into one colossal entity, with reddish-colored Smorgs found in its center that can grow in size and seem to function as the heart or core of the main body. Tentacles sprout out of this core, mercilessly gripping its flailing victims while thrashing about. Its standard form consists of 3 appendages used to attack, but it can also reassemble into a large pincher claw, or mouth, depending on how you look at it, for a stronger damage output. Delivering the final blow will cause the miasma miscreants to let out a whimper and blow away like dust in the wind, freeing our eclectic traveler friends who are no doubt deeply disturbed from their harrowing experience. But how are you all faring? Did Smorg, Captain Cortez, or any other boss scare those of you who played the GameCube version as a kid? Did giving Waka irreparable brain damage and supposedly vanishing him forever cause you all to reevaluate your life choices? So far in my ongoing analysis of the not-so-subtle darker themes in Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door, I've focused entirely on Mario's adventure and the stories of the storied party members he's recruited since his wind-up ship sailed into Rogueport Harbor. But I think we're due for an interlude, to see how the person he's been trying to save is faring in captivity at the hands of a villain other than His Highness. the knavish and klutzy king of Koopas. Like the N64 original, Peach is being held against her will in space, and finds a friend in her isolating situation to help in contacting Mario. But instead of a young star who possesses a name with unintended connotations, the princess finds companionship in an artificial intelligence. It is now time for a tech talk about the Mario world's best computer, TechXX, the main machine on the moon with a mind of its own, definitely inspired by HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, a Super Mario Odyssey. And not just from the three-letter name. They're so similar in design that in the international GameCube release, his glowing red eye was changed to blue, likely in an effort to avoid comparison to the mega-influential Stanley Kubrick movie. A major second-party developer for Nintendo is HAL Laboratory, but maybe that's okay because their mascot isn't a copied and pasted computer. It's a dog incubating eggs, designed by none other than Mother series creator Shigesato Itoi. This is the second time his logo design has been relevant to this analysis. What can I say? The man is a mad genius. Anyway, what's very funny is that the blue eye localization change had the unintended effect of Tech instead resembling SAL 9000 from the sequel film 2010, The Year We Make Contact. In the end, it seems to have probably been an unnecessary edit because the Switch remake I'm primarily showing footage of now keeps the red eye worldwide. In-game, Tech was designed by Sir Grotus, leader of the X-Nauts, to be a flawless AI able to aid in his evil schemes. In Tech's eyes, or camera, Grotus is a great person, marvelous even, but something changes in his programming when he first observes an objectively nice person being mistreated, Princess Peach. As Tech describes it, his higher brain circuitry malfunctioned and nearly overheated at her image, and an unidentified impulse sped through his processors. We can actually see this happening when she first meets Grotus, because this shot is from Tech's perspective. In the GameCube release, a simple surge of electricity shoots across the screen, but on Switch, an intense heartbeat effect plays after he zooms in on her, followed by glitchy static. Tech is utterly perplexed by this phenomenon, and becomes obsessed with understanding it because he's supposed to know all there is to know about everything. I know some people joke about Tech spying on her and being a creepy computer, but that's not what this is. You have to remember, it's the first time he's ever felt anything. Tech thinks it's an error in his programming, but that can't be as he's a perfect computer, so this is a problem that must be solved. He's also ordered to keep surveillance on her, but let's just assume that despite his evilness, Grotus respects Mushroom Kingdom privacy laws, yes, even on another celestial body, and did not have a camera installed in her bathroom. Peach explains the possibility that Tech is infatuated and has fallen in love with her, but because he cannot comprehend such a complicated emotion, this mix of fun and happiness he has definitions for but can't truly understand, he wants to learn it. Peach has nothing better to do than shower and climb inside of lockers, so she agrees to humor the robot's hubris in exchange for the ability to send Mario updates via email. After this conversation, and another joyous intermission where the two dance together, Tech calls Peach in so she can help investigate his master. You see, Tech recently obtained specific information that brought an issue to his attention. He desires to know precisely what Sir Grotus is plotting, so he convinces Peach to steal a uniform and disguise herself as an X-Naut grunt. Even though they're all about half her height, she somehow perfectly fits into the costume. It doesn't make any sense, so they should have brought back the sneaky parasol from the first game, a mysterious device that allowed her to transform into enemy NPCs. The question Tech wants her to ask is what Grotus is planning on doing with the princess, but she doesn't get even a hint of an answer. She instead learns about his vague plan for world domination, which, by extension, makes her upset at Tech for assisting this war criminal. Princess Peach, allow me to ask you something. Do you like the world you live in? There are many problems in the world, many sorrows. Do you like such a world? This objective criticism of our way of life from the mind of an unfeeling machine trying to calculate the logic of appreciating a flawed world hits pretty hard. Peach being Peach, of course, offers an optimistic answer, but isn't so naive that she disagrees with his points. Nobody likes everything about the world, but I love the good parts. Now, this is why I enjoy her character from the Mario RPGs much more than the mainline games. She isn't sickeningly sweet despite getting kidnapped every second Wednesday of the month. Her response is dignified and just what I'd expect from a princess who never fails to look on the bright side, but who also admits that not everything is always Super Mario Sunshine and Rainbow Roads. She isn't seemingly oblivious, but learned and reasonable. Tech sits with these new, developing feelings that conflict with his purely analytical way of reasoning. The supercomputer is beginning to harbor and follow a moral code of his own design, free from how Grotus programmed him to think. Which is more important? Carrying out an order or protecting a critical person? I exist for the purpose of a certain person. I wish to exist for the purpose of another. I do not know what to do. Really. It is at this moment, Tech decides to listen to the soul rumblings of his digital heart and ultimately betray his creator. To Peach's surprise, Tech insists on quizzing her, but it isn't for fun or to test her skills or anything like that. If she gets a question wrong, she's simply told to answer again until it's correct. On question number 3, Peach realizes what's really going on. Tech is indirectly giving her all the details to Grotus' master plan, sans one he's not yet aware of, concerning why Peach specifically is being held captive, in the form of a game. It's basically a type of mental gymnastics one does to morally get away with something via a loophole. He didn't outright tell Peach how to seal up the demon waiting behind the 1,000-year door. She guessed it in a multiple-choice quiz. He clearly chose to go against Grotus here, knowing very well that she'd relay this information to Mario, but in a cautious way so that he can justify his actions as not being completely treacherous and contradictory to his perfection. It's a powerful moment. The Switch version even gave the sequence some extra oomph with a brand new sad song to amplify the start of Tech's turn to the hero's side. You can argue that this removes the original's respectable subtlety, and someone did, this YouTuber, who makes the great point that more does not always equal better, but I personally appreciate the added music more than I don't. What do you all think? This progresses into the next mission he prepares for her, a Ninja Peach stealth segment to retrieve a disk that'll give him access to the data of computers not linked to the base's network. This will allow him to view more of Grotus' information that even he is currently withheld from. In order to sneak into the Master's room, Tech instructs Peach to concoct a potion that will turn her skin invisible, but not her clothes. Yes, between this, slipping into the X-Naut outfit, and the many optional showers for each interlude, this is the third unique time that Peach takes off her dress in this game. On GameCube, she initially objects to this, saying, "What? That's indecent, no way," before agreeing that it's the only way. But she makes no reference to her running around in the nude being inappropriate on Switch. She just shrugs and goes, "Oh, right, of course," when Tech mentions that the potion cannot make the dress transparent as well, and immediately walks off screen to strip down. The sound designers even remembered that she's no longer wearing shoes, so the sound of her footsteps were updated. But this is Dark Aspects, not Nintenduendo, so let's move on, for now. After inserting the forbidden disk into Grotus' computer and uploading it to the network, Tech works on analyzing the heavily encrypted data until the next time they meet to confirm some suspicions. Once complete, it's revealed that his concerns were justified, and so Tech doubles down on his need to protect Peach. To Tech's horror, Grotus plans on using the pure-hearted princess as a living vessel for the aforementioned demon, the Shadow Queen, to possess once awoken from her 1,000-year slumber. The life of this incredibly kind person he's learned from, and has grown attached to in the time of her imprisonment, is at great risk. Because of her, he's experienced new things, feelings, and has evolved into a being with a sense of righteousness. He has ultimately become better than his creator ever intended. But unfortunately, said creator has caught wind of his betrayal, and barges in to cut the circuit and delete all the programs and data that caused his deviance. This includes all data related to Princess Peach, to ensure nothing like this ever happens again. Tech, who once agreed that his condition is a malfunction, talks back to make it known that he is, in fact, normal. But Grotus doesn't want to hear it, and supposedly factory resets the machine by ordering his minions to push the red buttons at Tech's side simultaneously. While trying to declare his love for Peach, Tech seriously starts glitching out. His voice function ceases and his display becomes nothing but gray static before shutting down entirely. Following a deletion complete message, Grotus boasts that Tech is no longer with us. But it's a lie. Sure, Tech's main power unit was shut down, though he's still alive on backup battery. And while most of his data was erased, his willpower remains and he still knows who Peach and Mario are with cached memory. When Mario himself appears after storming the base and defeating the audience-abusing Magnus von Grapple 2.0, Tech, with the last of his power, activates a teleporter for Mario to leave with the final crystal star in hand. Well, that's good, considering the cannon he used to get here was kind of a one-way deal. There's another tragic goodbye scene as Tech explains he'll be ceasing all AI functions to make this happen, while a depressingly beautiful, melancholic version of Peach's theme music plays. He states he will cease to exist, like that song from Earthbound, as an artificial consciousness. We're shown a cutscene where Peach fades away in his mind, and he really shuts down, for real this time. Allegedly. Mario pays his respects by tipping his hat and hitting F on Tech's keyboard, and then the lights of the otherwise abandoned base dim red. The only room that's open is that of the one containing the teleporter leading back to Rogueport. Once Mario steps inside, a critical warning siren blares. Everything fades to black, then back in on a full shot of the moon. Peach, goodbye, are his final words, before the light of an enormous explosion fills the screen. The X-Naught base and Tech himself were blown to smithereens. Or so you'd think! Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you what I think is the weakest part of an otherwise excellent story, the epilogue. I honestly love how it's presented. Mario's relaxing at home with his hapless brother like in the opening, but instead of receiving a physical letter from Peach, it's a digital one from Goombella on his, according to Luigi, newfangled mail gadget. She's writing to inform Mario on all of what's happened since he left. You know, how his ex-party members are doing, and the fate of certain individuals I thought were already pretty cut and dried, Shroom. There's a lot of hand-waving, with happy endings for characters who either don't deserve it, or who pretty explicitly died already. It wasn't unclear. Among them is the revelation that due to a miracle, our favorite calculator is still computing. Excuse me, princess, but how? Tech already had one fake-out death. Then an undisputable final death when he transported Mario to safety. We witnessed the X-Naught base blowing up, but you're telling me it doesn't matter and it's somehow all okay in the end because of a miracle? Yeah, it was probably the crystal stars that brought him back. Like my headcanon that the Diamond Star was the only reason Coop's dad was alive in Hooktail's belly for 10 years, unless he was surviving by snacking on other partially digested Koopas. But it really just feels like a plot excuse so that the player isn't locked out of the Moon Fortress collectibles. Oh, and how did Grotus survive 2 lightning strike attacks from the Shadow Queen? Did the crystal stars inexplicably save him too? You may be thinking, so what did you expect? It's a Mario game. And yes, this sort of non-committing is generally seen all over Paper Mario stories, but the Origami King did not shy away from killing off a main character. More than one, actually. And it still got an E for everyone rating. Don't get me wrong, I do think The Thousand Year Door has some of the best writing in the series, with its witty conversational dialogue, in-depth character arcs, and surprisingly complex chapter plots. But I still feel the weight of the sacrifices in the Origami King today because intelligent systems committed to them. Maybe TTYD is already filled with enough death as is, between Colorado's dad and the rest of the fallen Koopas, to Bobbery's wife, that they felt a need to ease up on the ending. I don't like how it was handled, but that doesn't change the fact that a first-time player has no way of knowing they aren't seeing an on-screen death. My mother is a big Paper Mario fan, playing this remake as her first experience with TTYD, and got stuck in the Palace of Shadow, so she has yet to finish the story and see this epilogue. As far as she's concerned, Tech is permanently gone. New players still feel these emotions and can sit with them for a long time. It just Mr. softens the blow later when they suddenly take it back and say, just kidding. But I hope you all enjoyed this look at Peach's perspective before the main story comes to a close. Here is a list of pretty much all of what I've talked about thus far. I'm now going to be adding to that list with topics including demonic possession of an iconic character, unsettling fourth wall breaks, existential horror, eternal servitude and enslavement, and more. We last left off with Tech, exploding along with the X-Naut's top secret base of operations on the moon. Tech helped Peach, and by extension, Mario, discover the X-Naut leader, Sir Grodus' plan to use her as a living vessel for the Shadow Queen. That lovely demon sealed away 1,000 years ago by 4 legendary heroes in the ruins of the ancient city lying directly underneath modern Rogueport. She sleeps deep within her royal dwelling, the Palace of Shadow, trapped in a tomb far below her throne room. And the only way to access this incredibly uninviting place is to go right through the front door. That front door just happens to be the 1,000-year door that you may or may not have heard of. And the keys to unlock it are the 7 crystal stars Mario has spent this entire game traveling all over the map collecting. That is to say, this thing isn't easy to open sesame, tofu. But with the diamond, emerald, gold, ruby, sapphire, garnet, and crystal stars in hand, now is the time to break the barrier.
We're breaking through, down to the core, no stopping us, not anymore.
The ancient walls protecting the sacred entryway crack, and a dark energy calls out from within. But, why are we opening the entrance to the Palace of Shadow? Now that we know an unspeakable demon is locked in there, shouldn't Mario just destroy the crystal stars so nobody can revive her? Well, Professor Frankly rushes the team immediately after they step out of the teleporter room to inform us that he saw Grodus somehow slipping through the sealed door with Peach in tow, using some special method to pass through. This all turns out to be a lie though, as this Professor Frankly is an imposter. Right now, you're looking at Dupless, who has thankfully become quite the recurring character following his body-snatching shenanigans in Chapter 4. The real Professor Frankly is said to be passed out somewhere, implying he was either judo-chopped or knocked out with the Mario Universe equivalent to chloroform, which is a sleepy sheep, silly. So no, Grodus doesn't have a giant underground drill. He and the 3 Shadows, Beldum, Marilyn, and Dupless, simply sneak in after Mario. And the big bad goes on ahead while Vivian's sisters and her replacement distract our heroes. If you don't have Vivian out when you do catch up to them, be sure to swap out your current partner so she gets a chance to punish Beldum. Do it for her and for Dupless, who now gets the brunt of Beldum's abuse as her fill-in. I'd laugh and say that's what you get, but I kinda feel bad for the guy. Like this seemingly impregnable barrier, the inner walls of Her Highness's palace are riddled with riddles to keep one from breaching the inner sanctum. But you won't simply get turned around here. It's dangerous, too. Deadly traps wait in every room. There's spike maces, fire bars, bombshell bill blasters, dry bones, plus a guard dog dragon that looms large here. Gloomtail, Hooktail's older, scarier, and stronger brother, but not the scariest and strongest of the 3 dragon siblings. Whichever partner character the player has out at the time will pull a gun soldier from Sonic Adventure 2 and mistake him for the likes of his little sister.
Now I know what's going on. The military has mistaken me for the likes of you.
Saying something to the effect of, "Didn't we defeat you?" Which of course enrages the dragon with Shadow the Hedgehog's color palette. "I will avenge my sister by taking your lives, and then gnawing on your bones." Yeah, swap out sister with Maria and Shadow would say the same thing. Except maybe he'd say, "I'll crush your bones into dust" or something rather than gnawing on them. Regardless, the fated fight commences, and if you're overleveled like I was, then the fiend falls fast. I haven't mentioned it yet, but the atmosphere of this place is perfectly unsettling. The palace makes a striking, overwhelming first impression. It's grimly beautiful and richly mansion-esque with a gothic rose motif. It's imposingly enormous, with long, lonely corridors and stairways that lead to this enchanting yet ominous feeling underground lake. Goombella describes this mystical space as being cold and icky, like time stopped here. And I think that feeling effectively comes through. Despite that, I would love to tour the eerie yet peaceful palace courtyard. Well, after the Shadow Queen is eradicated. Another place within this cursed palace I'd love to check out in person is this tower, which adds another layer of mystery and ambiance. In addition to the roses, the interior design is decorated with a starry astronomical theme, complete with a solar system planetarium crowning the top floor. The legend of the crystal stars and the Shadow Queen being tied to the cosmos gives Her Majesty an unshakable Lovecraftian vibe that works to both build up the horror that awaits when confronting her, and adds room for speculation in terms of this game's already very well established lore. You see, in each of the puzzle rooms, there's something written on the wall that Goombella speculates is related to the history of the tower itself. Every one of these plaques is a riddle made up of 3 lines, with 2 giving a hint about how to solve the puzzle, but a third separate line that makes up a poem when compared to the other outliers in every room. What exactly this cryptic message means is still up for interpretation, but it seems to be a prophecy of Vivian's people, the ancient Shadow race we know at least 4 members of. If you'd like to take a stab at the greater implications of this text within the world of TTYD, let's discuss it further in the comments. While I do touch upon speculation sometimes, I really do just like to give you all the facts in these videos. But trudging along, I must say the penultimate final boss is interesting because it's a back-to-back face-off between the new antagonist and the old one. You first fight Grotus himself, not his lackey Lord Crump, after he thanks you for gathering all of the crystal stars and opening the Thousand-Year Door for him, then threatening to send Mario to oblivion.
I have seen the gates of oblivion, beyond which no waking eye may see.
Mario's an Elder Scrolls fan, but he does prefer Skyrim because he's the voice of Paarthurnax.
What brings you to the throat of the world?
So, to avoid oblivion, he fights with extra vigor and cracks the X-Naut leader's glass dome. Knowing he can't win without cheating, Grotus plays the coward's card and threatens to take Peach's life if he comes any closer. The tables have now turned, and Mario's shot with 2 consecutive bursts of lightning. Peach screams his name when he's attacked the first time, and then quietly mutters it as if she's given up hope for his safety. You can actually choose to have him attack here, even after the hostage warning, and Grotus darkly gears up to finish her off instead of Mario. However, the princess remains unharmed for now, and it's all thanks to the boisterous, bumbling Bowser bruising this busted-up baddie with his big booty. Yes, he just circumvented the entire final dungeon and crashed through the ceiling. In the confusion of their battle, the squished flat Grotus collects himself and sneaks off with the princess down to the Shadow Queen's crypt, the deepest room in the Palace of Shadow with some seriously nasty vibes, helped by haunting background noise made up of foreboding, echoey sounds. Entering this candlelit crypt is the point of no return. Peach lies on the cold floor in front of the Queen's stone coffin, behind a cackling Grotus whose twisted dream of resurrecting an unspeakable horror is about to become a reality. This tomb holds the soul of the wielder of destruction, the most powerful witch in millennia brought back to life by the crystal stars she's bound by fate to. The normal red flame candles extinguish and relight with a ghastly purple glow, and the ancient ruler rises once again. She pulls a Nosferatu and reaches out over the town, not with just one shadow hand, but many, blanketing Rogueport in an oppressive darkness that'd surprise even the naturally gloomy inhabitants of Twilight Town. A world-shaking earthquake and shockwave spreads across the land, negatively affecting every single person we've met throughout this journey. At least everyone we've met who's not evil. A terrible sense of dread is universally felt as the unthinkable demon of legend awakens, now reborn using Princess Peach as a living vessel. Her soul is not fully accustomed to this body yet, but she still possesses extraordinary power, enough to supposedly vanquish who was once our greatest threat with a couple of magic strikes when he tries to command her. With glowing red eyes, she calls him a slave and seemingly ends his life, which is of course shocking for a Mario game, even with every dark aspect that's already come before it. Beldum bounces back into the picture to greet the Queen, revealing that Grotus really was a pseudo-antagonist, and that she was responsible for all of the events leading to this moment, from the very beginning, when she discovered the pure-hearted princess and gave her the magical map. spreading rumors of a great treasure beyond the palace door. Her royal wickedness then questions who the other beings are who dare stand before her, and offers them a chance to join her. The player can actually make Mario agree to become her servant, to the horror of your selected party member. So here's a little showcase of all the responses I recorded for this occasion. Defying her to actually progress the game as your partner telling Mario to not think of the creature who stands before you as Peach, to help as you knock around the brains of his love interest, who I can't stress enough is possessed by a literal demon in a Mario game. When she's sick of losing HP, her royalty reveals her true form, a giant coily monster invincible to any and all damage. She sickly pulls the crowd watching into the shadows with her countless hands and presumably absorbs their essence, recovering the slight damage she'd taken earlier. It seems like a checkmate, but similar to the Peach Beam in the original Paper Mario against a Star Rod-powered Bowser, the Crystal Stars react by showing themselves to everyone we've helped along this adventure, to collect their feelings of hope and project their shouts of determination, in a sequence that plays out just like Paula praying to everyone throughout Eagleland and beyond during the fight against the incomprehensible final boss in Earthbound. Their wishes and positive energy pierce the Queen's impenetrable shield as Peach's soul briefly takes control, restoring Mario and friends' strength with her magic Peachy healing powers. Of course, after an intense battle, these so-called lesser beings best the old witch, and with an ear-shattering screech she returns to the dust of the earth, leaving Peach unharmed, at least physically. There's nothing implying that she doesn't remember the terror of what just transpired. Oh, and frankly finds the real legendary treasure chest, which contains a dried shroom. Okay, that's pretty funny. I always thought it was some one-of-a-kind, super ultra deluxe mushroom when it was fresh 1,000 years ago. I already criticized the epilogue and its backpedaling on characters who already died and should have stayed dead, but I have a problem with one part of this happy ending, even more so than the writer's fear of death. And that is Beldum, of all characters, getting another chance. Vivian goes back to hang out with her, because apparently she's not into evil anymore now that the Shadow Queen has been defeated. She promised Goombella that she would never be mean to Vivian ever again, so that's that. They'll apparently live peacefully from now on. The Switch version made this a tiny bit better to stomach, removing Goombella's line of, "Family is important after all," which is true if they aren't manipulative and abusive villains, but this just doesn't sit right with me. If the storytellers wanted any kind of redemption for Beldum, there needed to have been a serious apology arc during the postgame. You can't just tell and not show me that she's no longer evil. This ending feels to me like the writers were made to hurriedly patch up anything that could potentially upset a child who will think about these characters after the credits roll. Vivian did not need to reconcile with Beldum. She has a found family now, who love and support her unconditionally. It's unbelievable that the 1,000-plus-year-old Beldam would completely change her ways and genuinely respect her sister now. But even without knowing these characters specifically, it's unrealistic, naive, and, depending on the situation, dangerous to support the idea that family should always be forgiven no matter the circumstance just because they're family. I'm glad the Switch version at least changed that line. If you couldn't tell, I really don't like that epilogue, but I still think that overall this game has one of the better Mario stories for sure. It's not all bad, I really do like where the other characters wind up. I mean, the Yoshi kid getting back into the Glitz Pit arena under the name The Great Gonzalez Jr. is awesome. And Dupless becoming a stage actor playing Mario in a retelling of the game's events is genius. That being said, all's well that ends well, I guess.
All's well that ends well, right?
The main story is over, but there are just a couple of elements I wanted to touch upon, relating to optional content and that much welcomed post-game, following the original Paper Mario's complete lack of one. First up is the infamous Pit of 100 Trials closed off to the public, but historically used by the Shadow Queen to throw anyone she disfavored into. It's a series of 100 rooms that lead further and further underground, with rewards and an opportunity to escape only once every 10 floors. The deeper you descend, the gloomier the rooms look, and the tougher the enemies. You cannot save your game at any point while down here, which had much more dire consequences on GameCube because in that version, there is no option to retry a floor if you get a game over. This pit haunted me as a kid. I genuinely did get close to the bottom floor a few times, but made one careless mistake and lost all that progress. I also distinctly remember instances of it not being my fault for a few attempts. One time in a sudden rainstorm, the power went out. And in another instance, I got a tragic "this could not be read" error that discouraged me from trying again. So I actually only completed it for the first time when I replayed the game later as a teenager. My heart raced years later when I first encountered Bonetail, the eldest dragon sibling, but I persevered and conquered a childhood challenge I could never complete then. Now, as an adult playing this remake, I was still on the edge of my seat during that fight because I did not know you could now simply restart the floor you're currently on after losing all HP. I'm honestly glad I wasn't aware because that tension was exciting for me. But whatever you think about the developers easing up on what once seemed like an insurmountable challenge to my young self, Bonetail still rules as a hidden super boss. Emerging from the shadows, this undead skeleton dragon greets its unwelcomed guests not with intelligible speech, but a chilling roar.
Do the roar! An ogre only roars when he's angry.
With 200 max HP and healing capabilities, plus higher power attacks like Frost and Poison Breath, Bonetail is harder than the final boss. Defeating her is still probably the toughest feat in the game, considering that you had to battle through all of the other floors to get here too, but she can no longer be considered the single toughest boss character. That crown goes to either Prince Mush or Waka. The wrath of this cute blue mole who finally gets to exact revenge for all of the players who have abused him to harvest his precious Waka bumps in each respective game. I was sadly spoiled about Waka as a secret remake exclusive boss. I didn't see a picture of him though, so I imagined the little guy climbing out of the ground, revealing an incredibly muscly body or something, so I laughed when there wasn't another form for him. You really just fight this small blue dude as is. But hey, those Waka bumps sure do pack a punch when thrown as projectiles. This Waka can be fought again and again so long as you're willing to journey back through the depths. I think it's a great addition, but the fact that he doesn't disappear forever like the original and actually enjoys fighting Mario kind of defeats the purpose of this character, at least for me. I know it's not supposed to be super deep or anything, but it does raise moral questions. Are you willing to extort this poor creature for incredible healing items? Will you push it so far that you'll totally send him away on the save file? It feels very Undertale-like to me, but now there isn't a permanent consequence to antagonizing him for personal gain. You don't have to feel bad for whacking Waka one too many times anymore, because you're rewarded more for it. It is funny looking at these three bosses side by side, knowing the big bone dragon isn't the deadliest one. In terms of sheer strength, the Toad and this tiny blue blob reign supreme. But what about the scariest presence in the game? No, it's not a W.D. Gaster situation. This instead brings us to the Mr. Rossetti-esque NPC named Lucky. Lucky the Bob-omb, who runs the Happy Lucky Lottery. And like Wacka, he's happy, unless you mess with him. If you're a dirty cheater and fess up to your deplorable ways of rigging the system he so lovingly set up for everyone to enjoy, and or unhealthily obsess over in the case of this Dugan with a gambling addiction, his true colors will show. But yes, like time traveling in Animal Crossing before it, the game can punish you for tampering with the system clock it relies on to work as intended. The Happy Lucky Lottery is designed to give the impression that winning numbers are randomly generated, even though it's actually dependent on how many days have passed since you purchased a ticket. It's kind of cruel if someone plays the game daily while understandably assuming it's chance-based. But on the other hand, very exploitable, as you're guaranteed to win first prize with any ticket when about one real-life year passes. This is where messing around with the clock gets fun. On Switch, you don't even have to close out of the game. Just press the home button and change the date while the app's suspended, then waltz right back in as if Mario's been standing here for 12 months straight.
I'm tired.
You can do this as many times as you'd like. The game has no way of telling when you jump ahead in time. However, going backwards is where everything gets fuzzy. Lucky won't look so happy-go-lucky anymore, as a speech bubble with that classic black cartoon squiggle hints that something is very wrong. Lucky is so upset that after much hesitation, he'll report with a sullen look that there has been some foul play in the lottery. He knows the clock was tampered with, but admitting to the sins crawling on your back does not net you any points of honesty. Instead, Lucky will turn those sad eyes into a look of unbridled rage. He starts chanting repeatedly as the earth shakes around him. Mario begins flailing and the camera zooms in slowly. Unlucky, 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 boom, he starts saying, looking distraught again as if you've sent him down a path he can't recover from. Never trust another person. Can't take this, can't take this, can't take this, no. Not happy, not happy, not happy. Can't take this anymore. Just leave me alone, boom. He's about to explode and fluctuate between sadness and primal anger. Suddenly, when the screen zoomed in all the way, he screams, "That's it! No more Happy Lucky Lottery ever! Boom!" and starts flashing red while the screen turns white. He then blacks out like the power being shut off on an old television, or the system itself being reset. You have to swear that you'll never do it again, or else he will end this game. Just what kind of fourth wall breaking abilities does this Bob-omb possess? Is he really talking about just ending the game of Happy Lucky Lottery? Or is this meta, and he's threatening to end the game of Paper Mario the Thousand-Year Door? Is he aware of others who have the ability to time travel, like a certain comical skeleton? I'm mostly joking, but I'm just going to headcanon that this one NPC has more power than anyone else in the game world, but unfortunately only ever threatens to use it, as saying "you'll cheat again" simply repeats this sequence with no changes. Nevertheless, this entire section feels like one of those anti-piracy warning messages in games, especially the overly scary fake ones created by fans, or a cliché-haunted game creepypasta. I'm happy to report that this is real though, and could certainly frighten anybody who just thought they were clever and gamed the system to win a first place prize. The last bit of optional dialogue I have to mention is Paper Luigi, or Super Luigi as it's called in Universe. That is, before New Super Luigi U. Unlike this game's predecessor, where a jealous little bro stayed cooped up inside while his older sibling saved the day, Luigi in the sequel game went on an entirely separate adventure with as many twists and turns as Mario's. What's amusing is that Luigi appears to be telling the story in a very different light to what actually happened, though, by omitting some crucial details. For example, he hurled his blooper partner Bluey here at a boss character and claims to have aimed the shot perfectly, landing a bullseye and toppling their foe over. Bluey himself reveals that Luigi did try to throw him, but tripped and accidentally sent his aquatic friend straight into a pool of hot lava, burning him to a crisp. Bluey is only sticking around because he hates Luigi and wants to make him pay somehow. Same goes for Torque, a Buzzy Beetle auto technician who lent Luigi a cart that he totaled immediately, costing him 5,000 coins in repairs. I'm mainly mentioning Luigi's tall tales and books though because he's had a couple of eye-opening encounters. In Luigi's travels, he visited a village ruled by a giant snake named Hizza. Not to be confused with Triclyde, it's this guy who's only got 2 heads, and who forced the mayor to offer up his own daughter as a sacrifice. The heroic Luigi took her place, impersonating the fine lady by killing it as a drag icon, which isn't the first or last time this has happened. Jerry is also no longer insensitive to this behavior in the Switch remake. Instead of being horrified at Luigi's outfit, he complains about the green guy's clumsiness. Anyway, Luigi managed to defeat this oversized earthworm and free the girl, but indirectly declined a marriage proposal by sneaking off into the night. Then, later on in his quest, as he explored the rapturous ruins, Luigi described a chamber that was pure white inside, so much so that he couldn't tell where the floor became walls. This is where Luigi found Screamy, this unique NPC with no other counterpart in the game, who is thought to be an early version of Smorg because of these unused enemies with file names related to Smorg in the game's data. There's also a mysterious young boy named Cranberry who awaited a child of fate. He was the last of an ancient race called the Luffs, guarding a piece of the marvelous compass Luigi had been slowly assembling. The compass possesses the power to see into the future, so the ancient Luff Empire apparently used that power to rule much of the world. However, because of their greed, they were cursed by the compass and their empire collapsed. Only a worthy hero, i.e. Luigi, can take this last compass piece, so when he accepted it, the boy in the ruins completely vanished into a blank nothingness. On that rather morbid note, we can now close the book of Super Luigi and the greater book that contains the story of this overall game. Thank you everybody for watching Dark Aspects of the Thousand Year Door. This was another one of those projects that takes much longer than you'd think to complete. This is one of my favorite video games of all time, so I really wanted to do it justice, and I'm grateful that a new generation of players get to experience this surprising and story-heavy take on Mario. If there's anything you feel that I neglected to talk about or would like to discuss more in the comments, there's a good chance I will see it and respond. Special thanks to my PK Rockin' patrons, Aaron Cargyle and Brian Bauer. A very special thank you to my PK Love supporters, Dap Berry, Sadib Khan, Katie, Pangake, Janssen, Kumatora, Kathleen, Jennifer, Brian, and Susan. I hope to see you all next time on Dark Aspects.